Gaius Caligula, the crazy emperor of Rome, was born on a warm day in August of the year 12 AC. A child was born into the most powerful empire that the world had ever known. He was called Gaius Julius Caesar Germanicus, but history would remember him by another name, Caligula, a nickname that Roman soldiers who adored him gave him as a child. For a brief time, he would be the Golden Prince of Rome, but soon the child who once captivated the legions would descend into madness, becoming one of the most infamous rulers the world has seen. Gaius was the son of Germanicus, one of Rome's most beloved generals, and Agrippina the Elder, a noble woman of immense influence. As a child, he accompanied his father on military campaigns along the Rhine, dressed in a miniature soldier's uniform, hence the affectionate name Caligula. His father's men saw in him the future of Rome, the heir to an empire that extended from the wild lands of Great Britain to the sands of Egypt. But tragedy struck soon, in the year 19 AC, when Germanicus mysteriously fell ill and died in suspicious circumstances. Some whispered that the Emperor Tiberius, his own great-uncle, had orchestrated the poisoning. Whether true or not, the death of Germanicus plunged his family into chaos. Agrippina, fiercely protective of her children, confronted Tiberius, and one by one, Caligula's brothers and mother were exiled or executed. Only he survived. Despite his blood-soaked childhood, Caligula survived and was sent to live under the watchful eye of Tiberius on the island of Capri, where he learned firsthand the dark politics of power. The island was a world of paranoia and indulgence, where Tiberius, now a lonely and distrustful old man, surrounded himself with vices and cruelty. But Caligula played his cards well, hiding his true thoughts, captivating the court, and waiting for his moment. In the year 37 A.C., the old emperor died, and Caligula was proclaimed ruler of Rome. His ascension was received with great joy, since the people saw in him the son of Germanicus, a ray of hope after the cold, old, and distant Tiberius. At first, Caligula did not disappoint. He granted amnesty to political prisoners, put an end to Tiberius' oppressive trials, and showered the people with gifts. The games, banquets, and public shows turned Rome into a city of celebration. It seemed that a golden age had begun, but then something changed. Historians debate what exactly happened, but in the first year of his reign, Caligula suffered a serious illness. Some claim it was a fever, others poisoning. Whatever it was, when he recovered, he was no longer the same man. The charming young emperor had disappeared, replaced by something far more terrifying. What followed was one of the most infamous reigns in Roman history. Caligula's government became a spectacle of extravagance, paranoia, and cruelty. He emptied the empire's coffers on luxurious palaces and absurdly expensive parties. He proclaimed himself a god and demanded to be worshipped as the incarnation of Jupiter. Statues of him were erected in the temples, and he insisted that both senators and citizens bow before him. His madness went beyond mere vanity. He enjoyed humiliating the great senators of Rome, forcing them to crawl like slaves. It is said that he replaced the heads of the statues of the gods with his own image and even planned to appoint his favorite horse, Incitatus, consul, a position intended for the highest officials of Rome. Whether it was a real intention or simply a mockery of the Roman political elite remains a matter of debate, but it perfectly captured his disdain for tradition. His cruelty knew no limits. He ordered executions on a whim, sometimes simply because he found it funny. Neither his friends, allies, nor family were safe. He had his sister Drusilla, for whom it was rumored that he felt an unnatural affection, declared a goddess after her death. Those who displeased him were tortured, banished, or, worse still, used as entertainment in the bloody arenas of Rome. Perhaps the strangest of his obsessions was his fascination with the sea. Believing himself to be a divine conqueror, he ordered his legions to declare war on Neptune, the god of the sea, and the soldiers were ordered to march to the shores of the English Channel and collect seashells as spoils of war. Rome watched in astonishment and disbelief as its once promising emperor turned war into an absurdity. But power built on terror is never safe. And as Caligula's madness grew, so did his enemies, including the Praetorian Guard, the very soldiers who were supposed to protect him. In the year 41 A.C., after less than 4 years on the throne, a conspiracy was hatched. On January 24th, while Caligula was walking through a palace corridor, a group of guards surrounded him with drawn swords and stabbed him until the emperor, formerly revered as a god, fell to the ground bleeding, begging, and gasping for air. They stabbed him more than 30 times before leaving his body on the ground. His wife and young daughter were also executed to ensure that no one could raise their voice on his behalf. Thus ended the reign of Caligula, the emperor who had achieved glory only to be consumed by madness. His name would be engraved in history, not as a hero, but as a warning of what happens when absolute power falls into the hands of a deranged person. Even after his death, Rome struggled to understand what had happened. Was he really crazy, or was he playing a role to test the limits of what a ruler could do? Some believed that he suffered from an undiagnosed disease, perhaps epilepsy, or even a neurological disorder caused by a childhood illness. Others saw him as a symbol of power unchecked, proof that even the most powerful empire could be brought to its knees by the whims of a man. Although brief, the reign of Caligula endured, and his name became synonymous with excess, cruelty, and madness. Writers, playwrights, and historians would retell his story for centuries, a dark fable of how power can turn even bright minds into monsters. Tonight, when you close your eyes, remember the story of Caligula, not only as a story of madness, but as a reminder that history is shaped by those who wield power for better or for worse. His reign ended in blood, but his name resonates through time, a whisper from the past that warns what happens when an empire puts its destiny in the hands of the deranged. So sleep well, dear dreamer, and keep in mind that even the most powerful rulers, if left unchecked, can become mere shadows in the annals of history. Pope John XII, the Sinner, sat on the papal throne in the year 937 A.D. In 937 A.D., a boy named Octavian was born into one of the most powerful families in Rome. His father, Alaric II of Spalato, was a dominant force in the crumbling remains of the once mighty Holy Roman Empire. But young Octavian was neither a warrior nor a scholar, nor a figure destined for greatness. Instead, history would remember him as Pope John XII, the most infamous pope to ever sit on the throne of St. Peter, a ruler who turned the sacred halls of the Vatican into his personal den of vice. Octavian was born into privilege, but not piety. His father ruled Rome with an iron fist, and as death approached, he made sure that his son would inherit more than wealth. He would inherit the very throne of the papacy. At only 18 years old, Octavian was elected Pope John XII, a decision that had little to do with his spiritual qualities and much with a teenager now held the highest religious office in Christendom. But instead of humility and devotion, the Vatican was ruled by a reckless and immoral young man whose interests were far from the affairs of the faith. From the moment he ascended to the papacy in 955 AD and 955 AD, John XII transformed the Lateran Palace into something more like a royal court of sin. He surrounded himself with pleasure-seekers, gamblers, and courtisans. The sacred places of Rome became amusement parks for his. Some said that the Vatican looked more like a brothel than a house of God. He abandoned all appearance of papal decorum and replaced it with scandalous debauchery. It was rumored that he had committed open fornication even within the sacred halls of the Lateran. Cardinals and bishops whispered that he had taken lovers among the nuns and noble women. Some even claimed that he had desecrated sacred places with ritual orgies, turning sacred spaces into scenes of indescribable indecency. But the sins of John XII were not limited to lust alone. He was accused of simony, of selling ecclesiastical offices to the highest bidder, and bribery, of using the wealth of the church to finance his lifestyle. He spent more time hunting, feasting, and drinking than administering to his flock. He gambled sacred treasures, using the wealth of the church for his personal pleasure. The corruption of the papacy reached such depths that even devout believers could no longer ignore it. The whispers became murmurs, and the murmurs became shouts. The Pope of Rome seemed to have become the very embodiment of sin itself. The debauchery of John XII might have been tolerable if he had at least competently managed the political affairs of the papacy, but he did not do so. His recklessness went beyond mere pleasure. He was also a fool when it came to securing his power. In a desperate attempt to maintain his position, he formed an alliance with Otto, the first king of Germany, and crowned him emperor of the Holy Roman Empire in 962 AD. Almost as soon as the crown was on Otto's head, John XII turned against him and conspired against the very man he had elevated. He betrayed Otto by secretly aligning himself with the emperor's enemies. Otto, who was no fool himself, responded by marching on Rome in 963 AD. In 963 AD, he deposed John XII and installed a more suitable pope in his place. But John XII was not so easy to eliminate. The young pope fled into exile, only to return months later at the head of a rebel force that reclaimed the Vatican through bloodshed. His brief return to power was marked by revenge. He mutilated and executed his enemies, punishing those who had dared oppose him, but his reign of terror would not last. The story of Pope John XII ends with fitting irony in May 964 AD. In 964 AD, at the age of 27, he died suddenly in circumstances as scandalous as his life. Some say he was struck down by divine wrath, others that he suffered a fatal stroke in the midst of adultery. One of the most widespread rumors claims that he was murdered by the enraged husband of one of his many lovers, caught in the act of betrayal. Whatever the truth, his death did not occur in solemn prayer or in a moment of repentance, but in the shadow of sin, just as he had lived. Even in death, John XII left behind a legacy of dishonor. His reign had brought the papacy to one of its lowest points, an era in which the leader of the Christian world was little more than a drunken tyrant. Historians and theologians alike struggled to understand how the Church had allowed such a man to rise to power. His papacy became a warning, a reminder of what happens when power is given to those who do not deserve it. The Vatican, tarnished by corruption, spent years trying to erase the memory of its government. But history would not forget John XII, who became the symbol of the worst excesses of the papacy, a somber reminder that even the most sacred institutions are not immune to human vice. Tonight, as they immerse themselves in sleep, let the story of 112 serve as a reminder of the darkest chapters of history's darkest chapters. He was not a holy man, nor a virtuous leader, but a sinner who turned Christianity's most sacred throne into a palace of indulgence. His name endures in the annals of history, whispered not as a saint, but as a warning. So sleep well, dear dreamer, and remember that power, even in the hands of those destined to guide, can be corrupted beyond redemption. King John, the tyrant of England, in the year 1166, in the great halls of the Plantagenet dynasty, a child was born who would become one of the most infamous rulers in England's history. His name was John, the youngest son of King Henry II and Eleanor of Aquitaine. Unlike his older brothers, great warriors and nobles, John would not be remembered for his courage or wisdom, but history would know him as King John, the monarch who lost everything: his lands, his allies, his people's trust, and even his own reputation. John's childhood was marked by neglect and low expectations. His father, King Henry II, had very little appreciation for him and called him John Lackland because, unlike his brothers, he had not granted him any territory to govern. His older brothers, Henry, the young King Richard Lionheart, and Geoffrey, overshadowed him in every way, leaving John with little to call his own. However, John did not lack for ambition. Although he did not have Richard's military skill or Henry's charisma, he was cunning, manipulative, and willing to do whatever it took to secure power. When his father died in 1189, the throne passed to Richard, the legendary warrior king who would become known as Richard the Lionheart. But while Richard embarked on his great crusades, John began to hatch plans. While Richard was away, John made his move and conspired with Philip II of France to seize the throne, plotting against his own brother. But when Richard returned from captivity, John's betrayal was revealed. Instead of punishing him severely, Richard showed mercy, perhaps a mistake that England would later rue. When Richard died in 1199, John finally ascended to the throne, but unlike his brother, John lacked the qualities of a great king. He was cruel where Richard was fair, cowardly where Richard was brave, and incompetent where Richard was strategic. His reign was plagued by failures, setting the stage for disaster. One of John's biggest failures was his disastrous conflict with Philip II of France. John inherited a vast empire that stretched from England to Normandy, Aquitaine, and Anjou, but he lacked the military prowess needed to defend it. In a few years, he had lost Normandy, a crushing humiliation that earned him the contempt of his nobles and his people. His response was to raise taxes, desperate to finance his failed wars. John heavily taxed the nobility and commoners alike, bringing England to the brink of revolt. His need for money led him to extort the clergy, rob the barons, and imprison those who opposed him. His government was one of greed and oppression, which earned him enemies everywhere. John's thirst for power was so great that it even extended to his own family. In 1203, his young nephew Arthur of Brittany, the legitimate heir to much of John's French territory, was captured. Arthur had a strong claim to the throne, and many nobles supported him against John, fearing that his rule would be threatened. John ordered Arthur's execution, a crime that horrified even his most faithful supporters. Rumors spread that John had personally murdered Arthur in a fit of drunken rage and thrown his body into the Seine River. Regardless of whether he committed the act himself or not, Arthur was never seen again, and John's reputation was forever tarnished by the murder of an innocent prince. As John's failures piled up, so did the opposition to his rule. His cruel taxes, military disasters, and open corruption brought the English barons to a breaking point. In 1215, they rose in rebellion, forcing John to negotiate at Runnymede. John was forced to sign the Magna Carta, one of the most important documents in history. This charter limited the power of the monarchy and enshrined the idea that kings were not above the law. Although John signed it reluctantly, he had no intention of complying with it. Almost immediately, he tried to break his promises, plunging England into civil war. John's response was as disastrous as ever. He burned cities, destroyed castles, and turned England into a battlefield. He even sought the help of foreign mercenaries, hiring Flemish and French soldiers to fight against his own people. But it was too late. His kingdom was crumbling around him. In 1216, John's reign was collapsing. The French had invaded the country, the barons had turned against him, and England was teetering on the brink of ruin. While fleeing across the country, a stroke of bad luck sealed his fate. He crossed the Wash, a treacherous swamp, during a storm and lost all the royal treasure, including the crown jewels, which were submerged in the sea, which was swallowed by the mud and the tide. Sick and humiliated, John retired to Newark Castle, where in October 1216 he succumbed to dysentery, dying in agony, abandoned by his allies and hated by his people. Few mourned the death of King John. His own nobles had turned against him, his people despised him, and his reign had been a failure, full of cruelty and betrayal. But, in a strange twist of fate, the very document he had signed in his desperation, the Magna Carta, would outlive him and change the world. Although John himself was vilified, the Magna Carta laid the foundations for constitutional government, inspiring future generations and shaping the legal systems of England, the United States, and beyond. The tyrant who tried to defy the law unwittingly became the architect of a world in which rulers had to be held accountable. Tonight, as you close your eyes, remember the story of King John, a ruler whose greed, cruelty, and incompetence nearly destroyed his own kingdom. He was a man who murdered his own nephew, lost an empire, betrayed his people, and died despised by all, but his failure ended up leading to something greater. The birth of a system in which kings could no longer rule without control. So sleep well, dear dreamer, And keep in mind that even the worst rulers can leave lessons that shape the future. Ivan the Terrible, the Tsar who ruled with fear in the harsh Russian winter of 1530, under the golden domes of Moscow, a child was born who would become one of the most infamous in history. His name was Ivan Vasilievich, but the world would know him as Ivan the Terrible, the man who forged Russia through blood, terror, and war. Ivan's childhood was marked by tragedy. At only 3 years old, he became Grand Prince of Moscow after the sudden death of his father Vasily III. But a child could not rule an empire alone. His mother, Elena Galenia, acted as regent, but her reign was brief. She was poisoned when Ivan was only 8 years old, leaving him at the mercy of power-hungry nobles. The child prince grew up in an environment of intrigue and cruelty. The noble families of Russia fought for control, treating Ivan like a puppet. He was often humiliated, hungry, and abandoned, forced to witness the violence and betrayals of the court. These years of torment shaped his soul, filling him with deep paranoia and a burning hatred towards the boyars. But Ivan was not just any child. He spent his youth devouring books, especially religious texts and stories of Byzantium and Rome. He saw himself as a divine ruler chosen by God to transform Russia into a powerful empire. In 1547, at the age of 16, Ivan took full control of Russia and proclaimed himself Tsar of all Russia, a title that no ruler had claimed before. This was not mere vanity. By calling himself Tsar, he placed himself above the boyars, ruling not by their will, but by divine right. His initial reign was promising. Ivan introduced legal reforms, strengthened the army, and created a permanent army known as the Streltsy. He also modernized the administration of Russia, reducing the power of corrupt noble families and centralizing control. He expanded the borders of Russia, conquering the Tatar Khanates of Kazan and Astrakhan, which allowed him to obtain vast new territories and access to the Caspian Sea. But under this mask of progress, Ivan's demons festered, his paranoia sharpened, his cruelty grew, and his reign became darker with each passing year. In 1560, tragedy struck. Anastasia Romanova, Ivan's beloved wife and stabilizing force, died suddenly, probably poisoned by the boyars. Devastated, Ivan fell into a spiral of madness and pain. He became convinced that his nobles were conspiring against him, and his trust in everyone was shattered. With fire in his heart and revenge in his mind, Ivan unleashed his wrath. In 1565, he created the Oprichnina, a state within the state ruled by his personal army. The feared Oprichniki, dressed in black, riding black horses, and carrying the insignia of a dog's head, symbols of sniffing out traitors and sweeping away enemies. These men became the instruments of Ivan's terror. What followed was a reign of bloodshed and brutality. The boyar families were purged, their lands confiscated, their riches seized. Thousands were arrested, tortured, and executed by order of Ivan. Some were impaled, others torn apart by wild dogs. The cities that resisted him were razed. The first of these horrors occurred in 1570, when Ivan turned against the once loyal city of Novgorod, believing it harbored traitors. His army descended on the city and massacred tens of thousands of men, women, and children. The streets were stained red with blood, and corpses filled the Volkhov River. Russia had never seen such terror. As the years passed, Ivan's paranoia only worsened. He saw enemies everywhere, even among his own family. In 1581, during a fit of blind rage, Ivan struck his own son and heir, Ivan Ivanovich, with his iron-tipped staff. The blow was fatal. The Tsar cradled his dying son in his arms, realizing too late the depth of his madness. He had murdered the only person who could continue his legacy. The tragedy shattered him, and without an heir, Ivan's death plunged Russia into chaos. On March 18, 1584, Ivan the Terrible died. Some say it was a stroke. Others whisper that he was poisoned. He spent his last moments playing chess, a game of strategy and deception, just as his life had been. Russia was plunged into chaos and entered a period of political instability known as the Time of Troubles. Without Ivan's iron grip, rival factions fought for power, and foreign invaders seized the opportunity to attack. It would take Russia decades to recover from the scars of his reign. Was Ivan truly terrible, or was he simply a man shaped by cruelty who ruled in a brutal era? He expanded Russia, forged an empire, and strengthened its army, but he also tortured, murdered, and sowed terror. To his own people, he saw himself as a divine warrior, but he brought suffering and chaos. His reign is a paradox, a mixture of triumph and horror, of ambition and madness. He laid the foundations for the Russia that would emerge under the Romanovs, but at the cost of immeasurable bloodshed. Tonight, when you close your eyes, imagine the snowy streets of Moscow, the cold wind carrying whispers of the past. Imagine the operachniki with their black cloaks galloping in the darkness, their torches flickering like ghost lights. Ivan the Terrible ruled with fear, and, although he has long since turned to dust, his shadow still lingers in history. So sleep well, dear dreamer, and remember that power, when exercised by those consumed by fear and revenge, can shape empires, but at a terrible price. King Richard II, the fall of a golden king. On a fresh spring day in 1367, in the imposing halls of Bordeaux, a prince was born who would one day wear the English crown. His name was Richard of Bordeaux, son of the brave Black Prince and grandson of the powerful King Edward III. He was born into an England of chivalry, war, and greatness, but his reign would become one of betrayal, tyranny, and fall. King Richard II would not be remembered as a warrior king like his father or as an empire builder like his grandfather, but history would remember him as the king who lost his throne. Tragedy struck Richard at a young age. His father, the famous Black Prince, died when Richard was only 10 years old. The boy who was never meant to be king suddenly found himself heir to one of the most powerful thrones in Europe. When Edward III died in 1377, 10-year-old Richard was crowned King of England. Too young to rule by himself, his kingdom was ruled by powerful nobles, particularly his uncles, John of Gaunt, Duke of Lancaster, but as Richard grew, his desire to break free from their control grew stronger. He was determined to rule England in his own way, free from the influence of the nobles who had overshadowed his childhood. In 1381, just 4 years into his reign, England erupted in rebellion. The peasants' revolt, fueled by anger, high taxes, feudal oppression, and economic hardship, saw tens of thousands of people rise up against the crown. The rebels, led by Wat Tyler, stormed London, burning buildings and executing officials. The city was in chaos, and England was on the verge of collapse. With his kingdom crumbling, the young king did something extraordinary. He rode straight into the rebel camp and confronted the furious peasants himself with a calm voice and fearless gaze. He promised them reforms and convinced them to disperse. However, his promises soon failed and brutal reprisals occurred. This moment proved that Richard was more than just a puppet king. He had courage, but his reign would not be defined by heroism, but by revenge and paranoia. As Richard grew older, his belief in his divine right to rule became unwavering. He despised the old warrior nobles who had advised him in his youth and instead surrounded himself with a circle of favorite men whom he trusted above all others: Robert D., Michael Diol, and others. He showered them with titles, wealth, and influence, alienating the powerful barons of England. This favoritism generated resentment. The nobles, furious at being sidelined, formed an alliance against Richard. In 1387, the appellant lords, led by the Duke of Gloucester, took control of the government and executed many of Richard's favorites. Humiliated and powerless, Richard was forced to submit to their authority, a bitter experience he would never forget. But Richard was not a king who forgave. In 1397, a decade after his humiliation, Richard struck back with revenge. He arrested the appellants, exiling some and executing others. He ruled with absolute power, crushing his enemies and eliminating the opposition. Parliament became a tool of his will, and he declared himself above the law. He imposed heavy taxes on England to finance his luxurious court and grandiose projects, including a magnificent palace in Sheen. He was not a warrior like his predecessors. He preferred art, pomp, and poetry. He saw himself as a divine ruler, ordained by God, untouchable by mortal men, but absolute power begets enemies. Richard's arrogance, cruelty, and unbridled ambition turned his own kingdom against him. The lords who once feared him now plotted to overthrow him. Richard's biggest mistake was his treatment of Henry Bolingbroke, son of John of Gaunt. In 1398, he banished Henry for 10 years for a petty dispute, but when John of Gaunt died in 1399, Richard seized his vast lands instead of allowing Henry to inherit them. It was a fatal miscalculation. Henry, furious and exiled, returned to England with an army. What began as a mission to reclaim his inheritance turned into a full-scale rebellion. The barons and the people, tired of Richard's tyranny, joined Henry. Richard, believing himself untouchable, had gone campaigning in Ireland, and when he returned it was too late. His kingdom had turned against him. In August 1399, Richard was captured and imprisoned in the Tower of London, humiliated and alone. In September, he was forced to abdicate and ceded the crown to Henry Bolingbroke, who became King Henry IV. Richard II was transferred to Pontefract Castle, a cold and lonely prison. His final months remained shrouded in mystery. Some say he died of hunger, others that Enrique ordered his assassination. In February 1400, the deposed king died. His body was buried silently. His kingdom was nothing more than a warning. The story of a king who ruled with vanity, favoritism, and revenge, and who ended up defeated by his own arrogance. Although his reign ended in disgrace, Riccardono's story did not vanish from history. Shakespeare immortalized him in his work Richard II, where he portrayed him as a tragic king, a man who lost everything because he believed himself untouchable. His fall marked the end of an era and led England down the path towards the Wars of the Roses, as noble houses fought for control of the throne. Tonight, as you drift to sleep, imagine the halls of Westminster, the empty golden throne, the echoes of a king who once believed he was invincible. Ricardo, too, was a ruler who sought beauty above battle, poetry above politics, and power without limit. But in the end, even a king must answer to his people. So sleep well, dear dreamer, and remember that those who rule without wisdom can wake in a prison, their crown lost forever. Maria, Queen of Scots, the condemned queen of two thrones. On a cold December night in 1542, in the grandiose halls of Linlithgow Palace, a girl was born who would one day wear two crowns. Her name was Maria Estuardo, and from the moment she took her first breath, her life was marked by power, ambition, and tragedy. History would remember her as Maria, Queen of Scots, the queen who lost everything, not in battle, but in a game of thrones played with ink, treason, and steel. Fate struck quickly. Just 6 days after Maria's birth, her father, King Jacobo I of Scotland, died of illness, leaving his newborn daughter as Queen of Scotland. She was too young to understand her crown and too small to defend it. Scotland, a land of warring clans and constant wars, was now ruled by a baby queen, and danger lurked in every shadow. To protect her from the ambitions of King Enrique VII of England, who sought to force a marriage between Maria and his son Eduardo, she was taken to France at the age of 5. There, in the dazzling court of King Enrique II, she was raised as a refined princess and promised to the young French Francisco I. At 16 years old, Maria married Francisco, and in less than a year, she was Queen of France. The young couple reigned briefly, but their happiness was fleeting. Francisco died suddenly in 1560, leaving Maria a widow at only 18 years old and without a place in the French court and with her homeland calling her. She returned to Scotland determined to regain her birthright, but Scotland was no longer the land she had left as a child. It was divided between Catholics and Protestants, nobles who sought power for themselves, and the ever-threatening shadow of her cousin, Queen Isabel I of England. Maria, a Catholic queen in a Protestant kingdom, was a ruler out of place. Maria's reign was full of conflicts, but her biggest mistake was her choice of husbands. Seeking a strong consort, she married her cousin Enrique Stuart, Lord Darnley, a handsome but arrogant nobleman. At first it seemed like a perfect match, but Darnley soon became a drunk, a liar, and a jealous tyrant. His paranoia peaked in 1566, when he and a group of nobles assassinated Maria's secretary David Rito in front of her while she was pregnant. The once promising marriage fell apart and turned into hatred, and Maria soon found herself embroiled in a dark conspiracy. In 1567, Darnley was found murdered, his body lying in the gardens of Kirkhofield after his house was blown up. The main suspect was Maria's new favorite, the ambitious and dangerous James Hearn, Earl of Bothwell. Within weeks, Maria married Bothwell, a move that scandalized Scotland. Some believed that she loved him, others claimed that she had been forced to marry. Whatever the truth, the people turned against her. The Scottish nobles rebelled and forced Maria to abdicate in favor of her young son. Jacobo I, betrayed, imprisoned, and stripped of her power, Maria fled to England seeking the protection of her cousin, Queen Isabel. But Isabel, always wary of rivals, considered her not a guest, but a threat. For 19 years, Maria was a prisoner in England, moving from castle to castle, a queen in name only. She wrote letters, plotted escapes, and tried to gather support, but with each passing year, her hope faded and Isabel's patience ran out. In 1586, Maria was implicated in the Babington plot, a plot to assassinate Isabel and place Maria on the English throne. It didn't matter if she was truly involved or simply a pawn in a bigger game. Isabel signed her death sentence on February 8, 1587, in the cold and ancient halls of Fotheringhay Castle. Maria faced her fate dressed in bright red, the color of Catholic martyrdom. She ascended the scaffold serene and majestic, forgave her executioners, prayed for Scotland and England, and rested her head on the block. The first blow failed, the second struck her neck, but did not sever it. The third ended the life of Maria, Queen of Scots. The executioner raised her head for all to see, but in a final, cruel twist, her red locks remained in his hand. Maria was wearing a wig, as her hair was thin and gray from years of suffering. Although she died as a traitor in England, Maria's blood still had power. Her son Jacobo I, sixth King of Scotland, would eventually become Jacobo I of England, uniting both crowns under one monarch. The woman Isabel had feared in life brought in her death the union that Isabel had sought to control. Maria's story is one of beauty and betrayal, power and downfall. She was a queen born to rule, but destined to fall. She spent her life fighting for a throne that she would never occupy, her destiny sealed by the men around her, and her legacy forever linked to the blood-stained pages of history. Tonight, when you close your eyes, imagine Maria in her last moments, a queen without a crown, a woman who played the great game and lost. Her voice still echoes in history, a whisper from the past. So sleep well, dear dreamer, and remember that power, once lost, is never recovered. The Emperor Rodolfo II, the mad emperor of magic and melancholy. In the great halls of Vienna on a cold winter night of 1552, a child was born into the powerful dynasty of the Habsburgs. He was called Rodolfo and was destined to wear the crown of the Holy Roman Germanic Empire. But, unlike his warrior ancestors and calculating statesmen, Rodolfo II would not be remembered for his conquests or for his wisdom in government. But history would know him as the Mad Emperor, the ruler who was lost in alchemy, astrology, and occultism, while his empire slipped through his fingers. Rodolfo grew up in the splendid courts of Spain, where he spent much of his youth under the influence of his strict and devout uncle, King Felipe II of Spain. The Spanish court was a world of rigid Catholic piety, suffocating discipline, and inflexible political order. But young Rodolfo was different. He was quiet, introverted, and not attracted to war or politics, but to art, mysticism, and the unknown. From a very young age, he suffered episodes of melancholy, what today we would call depression, and he was tormented by a dark mind, plagued by paranoia and indecision. While his tutors prepared him for government, his heart was elsewhere, in the stars, in the strange and forbidden books of alchemists, and in the wonders of the natural world. In 1576, at the age of 24, Rodolfo was crowned emperor of the Holy Roman Germanic Empire, ruling vast territories stretching from Austria and Bohemia to the confines of the empire. But while his kingdom needed a strong and determined ruler, Rodolfo was quite the opposite. Instead of focusing on politics, he turned his imperial court of Praga into a sanctuary of secrets, a refuge for magicians, scientists, and alchemists. He filled his palace with art, strange machines, and rare wonders, collecting everything from ancient manuscripts to strange artifacts. His obsession with the occult became legendary. Under Rodolfo's reign, Praga became the most mysterious city in Europe. He gathered the brightest thinkers and the most eccentric minds of his time. Johannes Kepler, the brilliant mathematician and astronomer. Tycho Brahe, the visionary Danish astrologer. Edward Kelly, the alchemist and supposed communicator with angels. And John Dee, the enigmatic scholar who claimed to have the key to the supernatural. While the rest of Europe waged wars and built empires, Rodolfo's court became a laboratory of dreams and nightmares where alchemists sought the philosopher's stone, astrologers read the destiny of kings, and inventors built strange contraptions in search of eternal wisdom. But while Rodolfo locked himself in his towers of wonders, his empire began to decay. He neglected diplomacy, let his nobles run wild, and ignored the growing tensions between Catholics and Protestants, which would soon erupt in the 30 Years' War. His mental state worsened. He became deeply paranoid, believing himself surrounded by traitors and spies, and he refused to marry, which further destabilized the future of the Habsburg dynasty. His behavior became erratic. He withdrew from public life, suffered long periods of seclusion, and indulged in strange rituals, convinced that he was about to unveil the secrets of the universe. In 1605, his enemies grew fed up. His younger brother, Matthias, backed by the powerful Habsburg nobles, turned against him. Rodolfo, who had been the most powerful man in Christendom, found himself a prisoner in his own castle, stripped of his lands and authority. In 1611, he was forced to abdicate, and Matthias took the throne. The once glorious court of Praga, with all its sorcerers, scientists, and visionaries, was dismantled. The emperor, abandoned and shattered, spent his last months wandering through his vast collection of art and relics and talking to the ghosts of a past that no longer existed. On January 20th, 1612, Rodolfo too died alone in his castle. No great ceremonies were held in his honor. His empire moved on without him, leaving behind the shattered remains of his dreams of alchemy, immortality, and lost knowledge. Although his reign was a failure, Rodolfo left behind something strange and invaluable. He preserved knowledge, fostered thought, and gathered some of the brightest minds of his time. Without his patronage, Kepler would never have revolutionized astronomy. BR's observations could have been lost, and the spirit of curiosity of the Renaissance could have faded too soon. Even in his madness, he was a man who dared to dream, to seek the meaning of the stars, and to unveil the secrets of life itself. Although his empire collapsed, his legacy endured in science, art, and the eternal search for knowledge. Tonight, as you immerse yourself in sleep, imagine the halls of the castle of Praga, where the flickering light of candles dances on strange machines and unread tomes. Imagine the emperor lost in his world of symbols and secrets, chasing the impossible while his kingdom crumbled around him. So sleep well, dear dreamer, and remember that sometimes the brightest minds are also the most tormented, and that those who seek the secrets of the universe may end up consumed by them. Queen Ranavalona I, the ruthless queen of Madagascar. On a distant island in the warm waters of the Indian Ocean, a girl was born who would one day rule her kingdom with an iron fist. Her name was Ranavalona, and she would go down in history as one of the most feared and controversial rulers of Madagascar. For some, She was a defender of sovereignty who protected her people from the growing influence of European powers. For others, she was a tyrant whose brutal reign bathed her kingdom in blood. But, whether she was seen as a heroine or a villain, one thing was certain. Ranavalona was a queen unlike any other. Ranavalona was not born into royalty. She was a commoner, the daughter of a man who had helped discover a plot against King Andriana Pomerina, the great unifier of Madagascar. In gratitude, the king adopted Ranavalona into the royal house and arranged for her to marry his son Radama, the future king of Madagascar. Radama became king, Radama I, in 1810, and under his rule, Madagascar opened its doors to European influences. Christian missionaries arrived, schools were built, and new trade agreements flourished, but not everyone in the kingdom welcomed these changes. Among the detractors was Radama's own wife, Ranavalona, who saw foreigners not as allies, but as invaders. When Radama died in 1828, a power struggle erupted. According to tradition, the throne should have passed to one of Radama's nephews, but Ranavalona had other plans. With the support of powerful military leaders, she seized the throne before her rivals could react. Those who opposed her were executed quickly. The daughter of a commoner became Queen Ranavalona. Ranavalona quickly reversed the policies of her late husband. She expelled Christian missionaries, prohibited European customs, and the teaching of foreign languages. She considered Christianity as a tool of colonialism, a threat to her power and to the traditions of Madagascar. Her reign became known for its brutality. Anyone suspected of treason, conversion to Christianity, or being a political enemy was subjected to the cruel Tangina test, a mortal trial by poisoning. Those who survived were declared innocent, and those who perished were considered guilty. Justice in the Queen's eyes was that simple. Entire communities were massacred for defying her government. Tens of thousands of people died in purges, while countless others perished due to forced labor in the construction of fortresses and roads under the orders of the Queen. Ranavalona's reign became an era of fear, in which loyalty was bought with blood, and suspicion could mean death. Despite her cruelty, Ranavalona was a master strategist. She managed to keep the European powers at bay in an era when much of Africa fell under colonial rule. The French and British tried to overthrow her, but she outsmarted them repeatedly. In 1845, the French and British navies launched an attack on Madagascar, determined to end her reign, but Ranavalona was prepared. Thanks to her formidable army and knowledge of the terrain, she defeated the invading forces and secured her place on the throne. Madagascar remained independent, untouched by colonial hands for over 3 decades. Ranavalona ruled with absolute power, but in the 1860s, her health began to fail. She had outlived her rivals, her enemies, and even many of her advisors. In 1861, after 33 years of reign, she died in her sleep, a peaceful end for a queen whose kingdom had been anything but. Her death was received with both relief and sadness. Some mourned her as a patriot, a queen who had preserved Madagascar's sovereignty against all odds. Others celebrated her passing, seeing it as the end of a reign of terror. Ranavalona's son, Radama II, quickly undid many of her policies, reopening Madagascar to the outside world, but his reign was ephemeral and the future of Madagascar remained turbulent. The European powers would eventually take control of the island, but Ranavalona had kept them at bay longer than anyone thought possible. To this day, Ranavalona remains one of the most complex and controversial figures in history. Figures más complejas y controvertidas de la historia. Was she a tyrant driven by paranoia and cruelty, or a visionary who saw the rising tide of imperialism and did everything to resist it? Tonight, when you close your eyes, imagine the stone walls of the Rova of Antananarivo, where a queen ruled with an iron fist. Imagine the flickering torches of her palace, where loyalty and betrayal were separated by a fine line. So sleep well, dear dreamer, and remember that power is a double-edged sword, and history is never as simple as it seems. King Leopold II, the Butcher of the Congo, was born on a cool April morning in 1835 in the grand palaces of Brussels, a public figure who would one day become one of history's most infamous rulers. His name was Leopold, and although he would wear the crown of Belgium, his true ambition extended far beyond its borders. By the time his reign ended, millions of people would have died, an empire built on cruelty would collapse, and the name of Leopold II would be forever stained with blood. Leopold grew up in a Belgium that was small but prosperous. The country had just gained independence in 1830, and its monarchy was still young, but Leopold was not content to rule a modest European nation. He looked beyond Belgium, towards Africa, where the great European powers were dividing entire continents. Great Britain had India, France had Algeria, and the Netherlands ruled Indonesia. Leopold wanted an empire of his own. When he ascended the throne in 1865, he knew that Belgium alone could not afford a vast empire. But Leopold was not only ambitious but astute. If Belgium could not claim a colony, he would claim it on his own. Leopold set his sights on Central Africa, which was rich in ivory and rubber. In 1876, he founded the International African Association, presenting it as a charitable organization dedicated to bringing civilization to Africa. He promised European leaders that his goal was to end slavery and improve the lives of Africans. It was all a lie. Through deception, bribery, and manipulation, Leopold took control of the Congo in 1885, declaring it his personal property under the name Congo Free State. It was not a colony of Belgium, but Leopold's private empire, a territory 76 times larger than Belgium, where he ruled not as king, but as absolute master. Leopold's Congo was not a land of civilization, but of brutality, slavery, and greed. The vast forests of the Congo housed one of the world's most valuable resources, rubber. The demand for rubber skyrocketed due to the Industrial Revolution, and Leopold saw an opportunity to obtain unimaginable wealth. But instead of paying the workers, he turned the Congolese people into slaves. Entire villages were forced to collect rubber under brutal conditions. Those who refused or did not meet their quotas were subjected to torture, mutilation, or execution. The most infamous punishment was amputation of hands. The soldiers, known as the public force, were ordered to collect the severed hands of workers as proof that they had not wasted bullets. The piles of hands became the sinister currency of Leopoldo's reign. The women were kidnapped, children enslaved, and entire communities massacred if they resisted. It is estimated that at least 10 million Congolese died under the regime of Leopoldo, more than half of the population of the region. For years, the horrors of the Congo remained hidden behind propaganda, carefully crafted by Leopoldo, who presented himself as a benevolent ruler and patron of civilization. He built great monuments in Belgica, financed luxurious public projects, and was adored by his European subjects, who had no idea what their king was doing in Africa. But finally, the truth could not stay hidden. Brave journalists and missionaries, among whom Edmund Dean Morel and Roger Casement stood out, brought the atrocities to light before the world. Photographs of Congolese men, women, and children without hands or extremities spread throughout Europe. Public opinion turned against Leopoldo and demanded that measures be taken. Under enormous international pressure, Leopoldo was forced to cede the Congo to Belgica in 1908, but although the Congo became a Belgian colony, the damage had been done. The scars of Leopoldo's rule will never completely heal. Leopoldo never showed any remorse for what he had done. He had personally amassed unimaginable wealth, and as he lay dying in 1909, surrounded by luxuries, he ordered that all records of his government in the Congo be burned in an attempt to erase his crimes from history. But the world did not forget. Nowadays, Leopoldo II is not remembered as a great king, but as a butcher, a man who turned a nation into a labor camp and ruled with indescribable cruelty. Belgica would continue governing the Congo for decades. The terror of Leopoldo's reign left a wound that never completely healed. Tonight, when you close your eyes, imagine the silent forests of the Congo, where a terrible story still endures. Imagine the echo of those who suffered, whose voices were silenced, yet never forgotten. Leopoldo too thought that he could erase the truth, but history remembers. So sleep well, dear dreamer, and keep in mind that power, when driven by greed and cruelty, leaves behind not greatness, but shadows that never fade. History, like the night sky, is a tapestry of both darkness and light. We've wandered through the shadows projected by the worst rulers of the world, men who ruled with cruelty, greed, and madness. But do not fear, dear dreamer, because even the longest night must give way to dawn. Now let us move towards a different kind of history, one in which wisdom, courage, and justice give shape to the world. Rest easy as we travel to the lives of the greatest rulers, leaders who illuminated the path, left a legacy of hope, and demonstrated that power, when exercised with wisdom, can change the world for the better. Alexander the Great, the conqueror of the world. Tonight, let us travel through the life and legacy of Alexander the Great, the ruler who dared to dream beyond the horizons and conquer the known world. His story is one of ambition, bravery, and brilliance, the story of an extraordinary man whose vision shaped the course of history. Close your eyes and delve into a world where empires rise and fall, where legends are born, and where the echo of greatness still resonates through time. Alexander was born in the year 356 B.C. in Pella, the ancient capital of Macedonia. His father, King Philip II, was a brilliant military leader who unified the Greek city-states under Macedonian rule. His mother, Queen Olympia, was a powerful and passionate woman who believed that Alexander was destined for greatness. She told him that his lineage went back to Achilles, the legendary hero of the Trojan War. From a very early age, Alexander demonstrated extraordinary intelligence, courage, and ambition. At 13 years old, he was tutored by Aristotle, one of the greatest philosophers of all time. Under Aristotle's guidance, Alexander developed a love for philosophy, science, and literature, but his heart burned with the desire for glory and conquest. At only 16 years old, Alexander led his first military campaign, crushing a rebellion and founding his first city, Alexandria. His father proudly declared, "My son, you must find a kingdom big enough for your ambitions. Macedonia is too small for you." And, indeed, Alexander's ambitions would reach far beyond the borders of Macedonia. In the year 336 B.C., King Philip II was assassinated, and Alexander, at 20 years old, ascended to the throne. To assure his dominion, he quickly eliminated all his rivals, demonstrating astuteness and determination. With Greece under his control, Alexander turned his gaze towards the east, towards the powerful Persian Empire. Before leaving, he visited the Oracle of Delphi in search of guidance. According to legend, the priestess declared, "My son, you are invincible, armed with divine prophecy and unparalleled confidence." Alexander undertook his epic journey of conquest. Alexander's campaign against Persia was extraordinary. In 334 B.C., he crossed the Hellespont towards Asia Minor with a powerful army of Macedonians and Greeks. In the Battle of the Granicus, his forces achieved a decisive victory that opened the doors to Asia. His most famous battle took place in 331 B.C. in Gaugamela, where he faced the Persian king Dario III, who greatly outnumbered him. Alejandro employed brilliant tactics and led a bold cavalry charge that shattered the Persian lines. Dario fled, and Alejandro was crowned king of Asia. After the battle, he entered Babylonia in triumph, celebrated as a liberator. He continued conquering the great Persian cities of Susa and Paikpis, amassing immense wealth in Pepolis, where he burned the royal palace, symbolizing the end of Persian rule. In 332 B.C., Alejandro marched on Egypt, where he was received as a liberator from Persian rule. In the ancient city of Memphis, he was crowned pharaoh, the divine ruler of Egypt, to honor his status. He visited the Oracle of Soa in the Libyan desert. According to legend, The oracle proclaimed him son of Zeus Ammon, the main god. This divine backing further consolidated his authority. Inspired by his vision of a united empire, Alejandro founded the city of Alexandria on the Mediterranean coast, a city destined to become a center of knowledge and culture. Alejandro continued his campaign eastward, crossing the imposing Hindu Kush towards India in 326 BC. In the Battle of the Hydeus River, he faced King Porus and his formidable war elephants. It was one of his most hard-fought battles, but he emerged victorious. Impressed by Poros, he made Poros an ally, showing his respect for worthy adversaries. However, at the ends of the world, his men were exhausted after years of relentless campaigns and refused to advance further. Reluctantly, Alejandro agreed to return home, leading his army through the inhospitable deserts of Gidroja, where many perished from thirst and exhaustion. In the year 323 BC, at the age of 32, Alejandro fell ill in baby. Some say it was a fever, others believe he was poisoned. On his deathbed, his generals asked him, "To whom do you leave your empire?" He replied, "To the strongest." With these words, he passed into legend. His death left a vast empire without a ruler, leading to decades of conflict known as the Diadochi Wars. His generals divided the empire into kingdoms, but Alejandro's legacy endured. Alejandro Magno changed the world more profoundly than any previous conqueror. He spread Greek culture across 3 continents, from Egypt to India, creating the Hellenistic civilization, which fused Greek, Persian, Egyptian, and Indian influences. His city, Alexandria, became a beacon of knowledge, home to the legendary Library of Alexandria. He inspired countless leaders, from Julio Caesar to Napoleon, who tried to emulate his conquests. His legend grew with each generation, immortalized as the greatest general in history. As we reach the end of our journey through the world of Alejandro, let's take one last look at the man who dared to conquer the earth. He once said that there is nothing impossible for those who reach their end. Let's take one last look at the man who dared to conquer the earth. He once said that nothing is impossible for those who try. His legacy lies not only in the lands he ruled, but in the dreams he inspired. Tonight, let the spirit of Alejandro Magno guide your dreams, filling them with courage, ambition, and the relentless pursuit of greatness. Sweet dreams, dear traveler of historical wonders. Julio Caesar, the man who shaped Rome. Journey through the life and legacy of Julio Caesar, the man whose ambition, genius, and courage transformed Rome from a republic into an empire. His story is one of military triumphs, political intrigues, and a tragic end that resonates through history. Close your eyes and enter a world of power and glory where destiny is forged with bold dreams and decisive actions. Julio Caesar was born in the year 100 BC, into the bosom of the powerful family of the Julios, who claimed to descend from Venus, the goddess of love. From a very young age, he was taught that greatness was his birthright, but his family's political influence was waning and Rome was a city in crisis, plagued by corruption and civil strife. At the age of 16, Caesar faced his first test of courage when his father died, leaving him as head of the family. He navigated the treacherous political landscape of Rome with cunning and charm. At the age of 18, he defied the dictator Sylla by refusing to divorce his wife Cornelia, despite the grave danger that this entailed. Sylla spared his life, but warned him that in Caesar there were many like Marius. The prophecy hinted at his future power. To avoid persecution, Caesar enlisted in the army, where he demonstrated extraordinary courage and strategic brilliance that earned him the civic crown, the highest military honor of Rome. Back in Rome, Caesar used his wit and charisma to ascend the political ladder and became a lawyer known for his powerful oratory, captivating audiences with his eloquence and passion. Soon he was elected military tribune, then quaestor and later aedile, organizing lavish games that earned him public admiration. His political alliances were equally strategic. He formed a powerful bond with Crassus, the richest man in Rome, and with Pompey, a famous general. Together, they formed the first triumvirate, an unofficial alliance dominating Roman politics. However, within this association, ambition and rivalry simmered. In 58 A.C., Caesar became governor of Gaul, a vast territory in present-day France. With unparalleled military genius, he led his legions to conquer the Gallic tribes, expanding Rome's territory and amassing immense wealth. His campaigns were legendary. He braved harsh winters, built bridges over the Rhine quickly, and even invaded Great Britain. In the Battle of Alesia, he achieved his greatest victory by surrounding and defeating the formidable Concio. Caesar's commentaries on the Gallic War, his first-hand accounts, showed his strategic brilliance and mastery of propaganda. However, his growing power and popularity alarmed his political rivals, especially Pompey, who turned against him. The seeds of civil war were sown in 49 AC. The Senate, influenced by Pompey, ordered Caesar to dissolve his army and return to Rome as a private citizen. Defying the decree, Caesar made a fateful decision. He crossed the Rubicon River with his legion, declaring Alia iacta est, the die is cast. It was an act of rebellion that unleashed civil war with unparalleled speed and strategy. Caesar marched on Rome, forcing Pompey and his supporters to flee. In a series of brilliant campaigns, he pursued Pompey through Greece, Egypt, and Africa. In the Battle of Philippi, despite being outnumbered, Caesar defeated Pompey's forces, consolidating his control over Rome. In Egypt, Caesar fell in love with the young queen Cleopatra, whose charm and intelligence captivated him. Their alliance was both romantic and political, consolidating their influence in the East. Upon returning to Rome, Caesar was declared dictator perpetuo, dictator for life. He initiated radical reforms, such as the Julian calendar, economic relief measures, and the expansion of citizenship. His vision was to create a strong, centralized government that would end the corruption and chaos of the Republic. However, his power and ambition aroused the fear and jealousy of the senators, who saw him as a tyrant threatening their tradition of republican government. They conspired to end his mandate on March 15th, 44 A.C., the Ides of March. Caesar entered the Senate unaware of the conspiracy against him and, surrounded by conspirators, was stabbed 23 times. Among the assassins was Brutus, whom Caesar deeply trusted. According to legend, his last words were "Et Brute," and "You, Brutus," with which he fell at the foot of the statue of Jupiter. His death symbolized the end of the Roman Republic. His assassination plunged Rome into chaos, leading to another civil war. The power vacuum paved the way for his heir Octavian, later Augustus, to rise as the first emperor of Rome, marking the birth of the Roman Empire. Julio Caesar's influence extended far beyond his life. He expanded Rome's territories, laid the foundations of the Roman Empire, and reformed the political, social, and economic systems. His name became synonymous with power. Caesar became a title for rulers, from Roman emperors to Russian tsars and German kaisers. His life inspired countless works of literature, art, and theater, immortalized in Shakespeare's play Julio Caesar. His military tactics continued to be studied by generals, and his political strategies shaped the evolution of leadership and government. As our journey through the world of Caesar comes to an end, let's take one last look at the man who dared reshape Rome. He himself said, "Veni, vidi, vici," I came, I saw, I conquered. His legacy endures not only in the pages of history, but also in the ambitions of those who dare to dream. Tonight, let the spirit of Julio Caesar guide your dreams and fill them with courage, ambition, and the drive to forge your destiny. Sweet dreams, dear traveler of historical wonders. Ramses II, the pharaoh who defied time. Let us travel through the life and the legacy of Ramses II, the powerful pharaoh who governed Egypt with a power and an unequaled splendor. Known as Ramses the Great, he was a warrior, builder, and ruler whose name became synonymous with greatness. His reign was one of prosperity, monumentality, and legend. The story of a king who sought immortality through his feats and monuments. Close your eyes and delve into a world of golden sands, majestic temples, and a ruler who defied time itself. Ramses II was born in 1303 BC, son of Pharaoh Seti I and Queen Tia, during the 19th dynasty of ancient Egypt. From a very early age, he was destined to greatness. As crown prince, he accompanied his father on military campaigns, learning the art of war and leadership. His father, a great builder and warrior, inspired him to dream of an empire that would last for eternity. At only 14 years old, Ramses was named co-regent, governing together with his father. He was trained in the art of governing, military strategy, and diplomacy, preparing him to inherit the throne of Egypt. When Seti died, the young Ramses ascended to the throne, becoming pharaoh of Egypt, the living incarnation of the god Horus, with a vision of greatness. He set out to restore the power, glory, and influence of Egypt. His reign would last 66 years, which would make him one of the longest reigning pharaohs in history. Ramses II was a fearless warrior known for his courage, strategic brilliance, and military prowess. At the beginning of his reign, he launched military campaigns to secure Egypt's borders and expand its influence. His most famous battle was the Battle of Kadesh against the Hittites in 1274 BC. One of the biggest chariot battles in history, fought near the Orontes River. Ramses led his army in the battle with unequaled courage. Despite suffering an ambush, he gathered his troops, charged against the enemy ranks, and changed the course of the battle. Although the battle ended in a tie, Ramses declared it a glorious victory. To commemorate his triumph, he commissioned some monumental reliefs that represented the battle on the walls of the temples of all Egypt, including the Ramen and the temples of Abu Simbel. These vivid sculptures immortalized his valor and power to guarantee peace and stability. Ramses signed the Treaty of Kadesh with the Hittite king, a historic peace agreement that ended decades of conflict and established diplomatic relations between Egypt and the Hittites. Ramses II was a master builder who left a legacy of monumental architecture that lasts to this day. He adorned Egypt with colossal temples, statues, and cities that proclaimed his divine authority and greatness. His most magnificent creation was the great temple of Abu Simbel, carved into the cliffs overlooking the Nile. For colossal statues of Ramses himself guard the entrance with serene and divine faces. The temple was aligned so that twice a year the rising sun would illuminate the interior sanctuary, bathing the statues of Ramses and the gods with golden light, a symbol of his divine connection. He built the Ramesseum, his funerary temple, on the western bank of the Nile, a great complex of halls, courtyards, and colossal statues dedicated to his glory and legacy. He expanded the Temple of Karnak and completed his father's work on the Temple of Seti in Abydos. His architectural achievements were unequaled, designed to defy time and ensure his name would be remembered for eternity. Ramses II was not only a powerful ruler, but also a loving husband and father. He had numerous wives and concubines, but his beloved Queen Nefertari was the jewel of his heart. He dedicated the Temple of Hathor in Abu Simbel to her, inscribing, "For she for whom the sun shines." Her beauty, wisdom, and grace were celebrated in poetry and art. He was the father of more than 100 children, ensuring the continuity of his dynasty. He appointed his children to occupy high positions in the army and administration, ensuring his legacy and the stability of his empire. His devotion to his family and people earned him the title of the Great Ancestor, venerated as the father of his nation. Ramses II proclaimed himself a living god, worshipped alongside Ammonius, the king of the gods. He associated himself with Horus, the falcon-headed god of royalty, and with Osiris, the god of the afterlife. His image was sculpted in temples and statues throughout Egypt. The symbol Psi, which symbolized his divine authority, represented him with the double crown of Upper and Lower Egypt, unifying his kingdom under his domain. Through religious reforms, he promoted his own cult and revitalized the ancient temples. His divine status reinforced his authority and legitimacy, ensuring his reign was unquestionable. Ramses II governed for 66 years, guiding Egypt through an era of peace, prosperity, and monumental achievements. His reign marked the height of Egypt's power and cultural influence, remembered as the Golden Age of Egypt. He died at the age of 90, and his mummified body was buried in the Valley of the Kings. His tomb was richly decorated, reflecting his great and divine journey to the afterlife. His mummy, discovered in 1881, now rests in the Egyptian Museum of Cairo, his face preserved for eternity. His legacy endures through his monumental architecture, military conquests, and influence on Egyptian culture and religion. He became a symbol of power and greatness, inspiring generations of rulers and storytellers. As we reach the end of our journey through the world of Ramses, let's look one last time at the pharaoh who defied time and built an empire of stone. He himself once said, "I am Ramses, ruler of the rulers. Look at my works, you powerful ones, and despair." His legacy does not only reside in the temples he built, but in the spirit of greatness that continues to inspire us. Tonight, let the spirit of Ramses the Great guide your dreams, filling them with courage, ambition, and a desire to leave a mark. Sweet dreams, dear traveler of historical wonders. Genghis Khan, the conqueror of empires. Let's travel through the life and legacy of Genghis Khan, the warrior who united the tribes of the steppes and built the largest contiguous empire that the world has ever known. His story is one of survival, strategy, and absolute determination. The story of a man who rose from adversity to change the course of history. Close your eyes and enter a world of vast plains, thundering hooves, and legendary conquests. Genghis Khan was born as Temujin around 1162 near the Onon River in the rugged steppes of Mongolia. His father, Yesagay, was a tribal chief, but his power was fragile, sustained by alliances and oaths. When Temujin was only 9 years old, his father was poisoned by a rival tribe, leaving his family vulnerable and destitute. Abandoned by his clan, young Temujin faced hunger and danger. He learned to survive in the harsh wilderness, forging his strength and his endurance. He was captured and enslaved by a rival tribe, but escaped thanks to his willpower, vowing never to be helpless. These early difficulties shaped his relentless pursuit of unity and power. From the beginning, his life was a struggle for survival, and survival meant loyalty, strength, and victory. Temujin began to gather loyal followers by uniting warriors from different tribes who had suffered under the fractured rule of rival chiefs. His vision was clear: a united Mongolian nation, not by blood but by loyalty and merit. To achieve this, he married Borte, who became his lifelong companion and political ally. When she was kidnapped by a rival tribe, Temujin asked his blood brother, Jamukha, for help. Together, they launched a deadly rescue, but the alliance with Jamukha eventually soured as ambition drove them apart. Their rivalry culminated in a fierce battle in which Temujin emerged victorious. Jamukha was captured and, although offered clemency, chose an honorable death, refusing to serve the man who surpassed him. With his rival defeated, Temujin was proclaimed Genghis Khan, universal ruler who united the Mongolian tribes under his leadership. It was the beginning of an empire that would change the world. Genghis Khan revolutionized Mongolian society. He abolished inherited aristocratic titles and promoted people based on merit and loyalty. He imposed a strict code of laws known as the Yasa, which emphasized discipline, loyalty, and justice. He reorganized his army into units of 10, known as arbans, creating a highly efficient and loyal military structure. Discipline was absolute, and his warriors were masters of archery and horsemanship, known for their mobility and ferocity. He established a communication network of messengers on horseback, the Yam, which guaranteed rapid communication throughout his vast empire. Trade routes were protected, fostering trade and cultural exchange. Under his rule, merchants and scholars were valued and protected. Genghis Khan's ambition knew no borders. In 1206, he launched his first campaign against the Kingdom of Xia in western Xia, quickly defeating it and securing his western border. His next target was the powerful Jin dynasty in northern China. With unparalleled military tactics, he conquered its fortified cities, employing psychological warfare, espionage, and brilliant strategies. His reputation as an invincible conqueror spread like wildfire. But Genghis Khan's wrath was ruthless when the Khwarezmian Empire of Persia executed his envoys, unleashing his fury on them. He razed entire cities, leaving a trail of devastation, but spared artisans and scholars, recognizing their value to his empire. His army marched through Central Asia, reaching the Caspian Sea. No force could stand up to his brilliant strategy and unwavering ambition. Despite his fearsome reputation, Genghis Khan was a visionary leader who promoted religious tolerance, allowing his subjects to freely practice their beliefs. He sought to unite his empire not only through military power, but also through government and law. He abolished torture and established a fair tax system that guaranteed the prosperity of his people. He understood the importance of knowledge and invited scholars and engineers to his court, facilitating the exchange of ideas between East and West. Under his rule, the Silk Road flourished, connecting Europe and Asia, leading to a golden age of trade and cultural exchange. In 1226, Genghis Khan launched his last campaign against the rebel kingdom of Xia. Despite his age, he led his army relentlessly. Legend says that he was wounded during the battle, yet continued fighting with unbreakable spirit. In 1227, Genghis Khan died under mysterious circumstances. Some say he died from wounds, others think it was illness. His body was buried secretly, and his resting place remains undiscovered. Before dying, he divided his vast empire among sons, ensuring continuity. His descendants continued his legacy and expanded the empire into the largest land empire in history, stretching from China to Europe. The impact of Genghis Khan on history is profound. He unified the nomadic tribes of Mongolia, built an empire that transformed world trade and communications, and facilitated cultural exchange between continents. Despite his ruthless conquests, he laid the foundations for modern civilization by fostering tolerance, diplomacy, and the rule of law. His military strategies are still studied by generals worldwide. His name became synonymous with power and ambition, and his lineage spread throughout nations. It is said that 1 in 200 men carries his genetic legacy today. As our journey through the world of Genghis Khan comes to an end, let's take a last look at the man who unified the steppes and conquered empires. He once said, "I am God's punishment. If you had not committed great sins, God would not have sent a punishment like me upon you." His legacy lies not only in the lands he conquered, but in the spirit of unity and ambition that continues to inspire tonight. Let Genghis Khan's spirit guide our dreams, filling them with courage, vision, and determination to overcome obstacles. Sweet dreams, dear traveler of historical wonder. Asoka the Great, the emperor who chose peace. Let us travel through the life and legacy of Asoka the Great, the emperor who went from being a ruthless conqueror to a compassionate ruler. His story is one of power, redemption, and enlightenment. The story of a man who chose peace over violence and whose message of tolerance still resonates through time. Close your eyes and step into a world of ancient empires, monumental pillars, and the journey of a king who became a beacon of wisdom. Asoka was born in the year 304 AC in the Maurya dynasty, grandson of Chandra Gupta Maurya, founder of the vast Mauryan Empire. His father, Emperor Bindusara, ruled much of India, but Asoka was not his favorite son. Ignored and belittled, the young Asoka grew up with a fierce determination to prove his worth. Trained as a warrior, he was known for his courage, intelligence, and strategic mind. However, he was also feared for his ruthless ambition. After suppressing a revolt in the city of Taxila with brutal efficiency, he earned the nickname Chandasoka, Asoka the Fierce. When his father died, a fierce battle for succession broke out. Aoka emerged victorious and ascended to the throne of the Mauryan Empire. To secure his reign, he eliminated all his potential rivals, consolidating his power through fear and force. The ambition of the emperor knew no limits, and his eyes were set on the neighboring kingdom of Kalinga. In the year 261 AC, Ashoka launched a massive invasion against Kalinga, the only kingdom in India that resisted Mauryan rule. The war was brutal and ruthless, and was fought with unparalleled ferocity. Ashoka's army emerged victorious, but the victory came at a terrible cost. The battlefields were strewn with corpses. The rivers ran red with the blood of more than 100,000 soldiers and civilians who perished, and 150,000 were taken prisoner. As he contemplated the carnage and witnessed the suffering he had caused, a profound change took place within him. The cries of widows and orphaned children echoed in his soul. Overwhelmed by guilt and pain, he wondered, "What have I done?" It was a moment of awakening that would transform him from a conqueror into a seeker of peace, tormented by the horrors of war. Ashoka converted to Buddhism in search of solace and redemption, embraced the teachings of Gautama Buddha, renounced violence, and adopted the principles of Dharma, righteousness, passion, and nonviolence. Determined to rule with justice and wisdom, Ashoka dedicated his life to spreading peace, abolished the death penalty, promoted religious tolerance, and built hospitals, schools, and public wells for the welfare of his people. He banned animal sacrifices and protected wildlife, advocating compassion for all living beings. His transformation inspired his subjects, and his reign marked a golden age of prosperity, peace, and cultural flourishing. To spread his message of peace and morality, Ashoka erected monumental pillars and rock edicts throughout his empire. These pillars of Ashoka bore inscriptions in Prakrit written in Brahmi script detailing his policies, moral teachings, and guidance for his people. The pillars emphasized ethical governance, respect for all religions, and social harmony. They encouraged kindness, generosity, and nonviolence. Ashoka urged his people to lead a virtuous life, to respect parents and teachers, and to practice tolerance and understanding. The most famous of these pillars is the lion capital of Ashoka in Sarnath, which later became the national emblem of India. The chakra wheel of the Indian flag symbolizes Ashoka's message of justice and rectitude. Ashoka sent Buddhist missionaries to distant lands to spread the teachings of Buddha to Sri Lanka, Central Asia, Egypt, and Greece. He supported the construction of viharas, monasteries, and stupas, Buddhist sanctuaries, including the magnificent stupa of Sanchi, which is a testimony of his devotion to peace. Under his patronage, Buddhism flourished and spread throughout Asia, influencing cultures, philosophies, and civilizations. His vision of moral government and religious tolerance inspired future leaders, philosophers, and spiritual seekers. Ashoka ruled for more than 40 years and transformed the Mauryan Empire into a kingdom of prosperity and harmony. His legacy is not measured by the lands he conquered, but by the hearts he touched. He is remembered as Ashoka, the Great One, the ruler who chose peace over power, compassion over conquest. His Dharma chakra became a symbol of justice and truth, inspiring generations to seek wisdom and rectitude. After his death, the Mauryan Empire gradually decayed, but his message of peace endured. His legacy transcended time and borders, influencing spiritual and political leaders from all over the world. As our journey through the world of Ashoka comes to an end, let's take one last look at the man who went from being a fierce conqueror to a beacon of compassion. He once said that the only true conquest is the conquest of oneself. His legacy is not in the stone monuments, but in the ideals of peace, justice, and love for all beings. Tonight, let the spirit of Ashoka the Great guide our dreams, filling them with compassion, wisdom, and the courage to choose peace. Sweet dreams, dear traveler of the historical wonders, Charlemagne, the father of Europe. Let's travel through the life and legacy of Charlemagne, the warrior king who unified Western Europe and laid the foundations of the Holy Roman Empire. His story is one of courage, vision, and leadership, the story of a ruler who dreamed of a united Christendom and whose influence shaped the future of Europe. Close your eyes and enter a world of knights, castles, and a legendary emperor who became the father of Europe. Charlemagne, or Charles the Great, was born in 747, son of Pepin the Short, king of the Franks. His lineage was one of power and prestige, descendant of the powerful Merovingian dynasty. However, his childhood was shrouded in mystery, and little is known about his early years. In the year 768 EC, after the death of his father, Charlemagne inherited the Frankish kingdom together with his brother Caraman, but the tensions between the two brothers threatened to divide the kingdom. Destiny intervened when Caraman died unexpectedly, leaving Charlemagne as the sole ruler of the Franks, with an ambition and a determination without equal. Charlemagne set out to expand his kingdom and restore the glory of the Roman Empire. It was the beginning of a reign that would change the course of history. Charlemagne was a formidable military leader known for his courage, strategy, and relentless pursuit of victory. He launched a series of campaigns that expanded his kingdom into a vast empire. He conquered the Lombards in Italy, securing his position as king of the Lombards and putting the Papal States under his protection. He waged a brutal 30-year war against the Saxons, determined to convert them to Christianity. His campaigns were fierce, marked by battles, rebellions, and the infamous massacre of Verdun, in which thousands of Saxon prisoners were executed. However, his efforts were ultimately successful, and the Saxons became loyal subjects. He also defeated the Avars in Central Europe, expanding his empire to the Danube, and launched campaigns in Spain against the Moors. His conquests created a united Christian empire that stretched throughout Western Europe, from the Pyrenees to the Danube, and from the North Sea to Italy. On Christmas Day of the year 800, Charlemagne attended Mass at the Basilica of St. Peter in Rome, in a moment that changed history. Pope Leo III crowned him Emperor of the Romans. The act symbolized the rebirth of the Western Roman Empire, linking the reign of Charlemagne with the ancient glory of Rome. The coronation established the Holy Roman Empire, consolidating the power and authority of Charlemagne. It also marked the alliance between the Frankish monarchy and the Catholic Church, an association that would shape European politics and religion for centuries. Charlemagne's vision was not only conquest, but unity. He dreamed of a Christian empire in which faith and knowledge flourished, uniting his subjects under one God and one ruler. Charlemagne was not only a warrior, but also a visionary leader who valued education and culture, determined to revive learning and literacy. He initiated the Carolingian Renaissance, a rebirth of art, literature, and education in his empire. He invited scholars from all over Europe, including Alcuin of York, to his court in Aachen, transforming it into a center of learning and intellectual exchange. He established schools in monasteries and cathedrals, emphasizing the study of Latin literature and theology. Under his patronage, manuscripts were copied and preserved, safeguarding ancient knowledge for future generations. He reformed the writing system by introducing the Carolingian minuscule, a clear and legible script that became the basis of modern European writing. Charlemagne himself was a lifelong learner, studying Latin and Greek and encouraging his children to receive an education. I believe that knowledge was essential for good government and the spread of Christianity. Charlemagne was a just and wise ruler who reformed the legal system and standardized laws throughout his vast empire. He issued capitularies, written decrees governing the administration of justice and religious observance. He protected the poor and weak, enforced Christian morality, and promoted social welfare. He appointed local rulers called counts to administer justice, collect taxes, and keep order. To ensure their loyalty, he sent royal envoys, missi dominici, to oversee local government. His reforms strengthened the unity and stability of his empire, ensuring the peace and prosperity of his subjects. His vision of government was one of order, faith, and justice. Charlemagne ruled for 46 years, transforming Western Europe into a powerful, united Christian empire. His legacy as the father of Europe endures, as he laid the foundations for modern European nations, influencing politics, religion, and culture. After his death in 814 A.C., his empire was divided among his grandchildren, leading to the formation of France, Italy, and Germany. However, his vision of a united Christendom inspired future leaders, from the emperors of the Holy Roman Empire to Napoleon Bonaparte. His influence on education, law, and government shaped the medieval world and laid foundations for the Renaissance. His name became legendary, celebrated in the Song of Roland, a medieval epic immortalizing his feats. Our journey through the world of Charlemagne comes to an end. Let's take one last look at the man who unified Europe and dreamed of a better world. He once said, "Doing what is right is better than knowing it, but to do what is right you must know what is right." His legacy lies not only in the empire he built, but in the vision of unity, knowledge, and justice he inspired. May the spirit of Charlemagne guide your dreams tonight, filling them with wisdom, courage, and the vision to change the world. Sweet dreams, dear traveler of historical wonders, Queen Elizabeth I, the Virgin Queen who ruled an empire. Let us travel through the life and legacy of Queen Elizabeth I, the monarch who defied expectations and led England to a golden age of culture, prosperity, and exploration. Her story is one of courage, intellect, and resilience, the story of a woman who rose above political intrigue and personal danger to become one of the most iconic rulers in history. Close your eyes and enter a world of great palaces, fierce battles, and a queen whose legacy marked the destiny of an empire. Elizabeth Tudor was born on September 7th, 1533, daughter of King Henry VIII and his second wife, Anne Boleyn. Her birth was met with disappointment, as her father desperately wanted a male heir. Her mother, Anne Boleyn, fell into disgrace and was executed when Elizabeth was only 2 years old. Declared illegitimate, Elizabeth's future became uncertain despite her precarious position. Elizabeth was very intelligent and had received a fine education. She studied Latin, Greek, French, and Italian with renowned tutors, and mastered history, philosophy, and rhetoric. Her sharp mind and keen political instinct began to take shape, but her life was fraught with dangers. Her father married 4 more times, and her half-sister Mary became queen after the death of her brother Edward VI. Mary saw Elizabeth as a threat and imprisoned her in the Tower of London on charges of treason. Elizabeth faced death, but survived thanks to her diplomacy, courage, and patience. In 1558, Queen Mary passed away and Elizabeth ascended the throne at the age of 25. Her coronation was a great spectacle celebrated with joy and hope by her people, but her reign was immediately threatened. England was divided by religious conflicts, faced financial ruin, and threatened by powerful enemies. Elizabeth navigated the treacherous waters of politics with remarkable skill. She established the Elizabethan religious settlement, unifying her kingdom by creating the Church of England, a compromise between Protestantism and Catholicism. Her decision to remain single earned her the title Virgin Queen. Her famous declaration, "I am married to England," was a choice of power and independence over political alliances. Her reign became known as the Elizabethan era, a golden age of exploration, culture, and prosperity. In 1588, England faced its greatest threat, the Spanish Armada, a powerful fleet sent by King Philip II of Spain to invade and conquer England. Outnumbered and facing imminent danger, Elizabeth rallied her navy and people with a speech that became legendary. Dressed in armor, she addressed her troops at Tilbury and declared, "I have the body of a weak and fearful woman, but I have the heart and stomach of a king." Her words inspired her forces to fight with unmatched courage. Thanks to brilliant naval strategy and the fierce determination of her sailors, the English fleet defeated the Armada, marking one of history's greatest military victories. The victory secured England's independence, consolidated it as a formidable naval power, and inspired national pride. Elizabeth's reign witnessed an extraordinary cultural renaissance, giving rise to the Elizabethan era of art, literature, and music. She was a great patron of the arts and supported playwrights, musicians, and poets who created masterpieces that shaped English culture. William Shakespeare became the era's greatest playwright, writing timeless works such as Hamlet, Macbeth, and Romeo and Juliet. Christopher Marlowe and Edmund Spenser also flourished, enriching English literature with their poetic genius. The courtly dances, the music, and elaborate parades celebrated the greatness of his reign. The Globe Theatre became a cultural center that attracted audiences from all walks of life to experience the magic of theater and storytelling. Isabel herself was an accomplished poet and musician, famous for her wit, eloquence, and charm. Her court became a center of intellectual and artistic brilliance. Under Isabel's reign, England embarked on bold voyages of exploration that laid the foundations of the British Empire. She granted letters of marque to explorers like Francis Drake, who became the first Englishman to go around the world, bringing wealth and glory to England. Walter Raleigh founded the first English colony in North America, which he called Virginia in honor of the Virgin Queen. Commerce flourished and England's influence spread across the seas, challenging the dominance of Spain and Portugal. These voyages of discovery expanded the knowledge of the world, paving the way for future empires and global trade networks. Isabel reigned for 45 years, guiding England through religious turmoil, foreign threats, and economic challenges. Her leadership brought stability, prosperity, and cultural splendor, marking the Elizabethan era as one of the grandest periods in English history. She died on March 24, 1603, in Richmond Palace, passing the throne to James VI of Scotland, uniting England and Scotland under a single crown. Her death marked the end of the Tudor dynasty, but her legacy endured. She is remembered as Gloriana, the Virgin Queen, who ruled with wisdom, strength, and grace. Her reign inspired poets, artists, and historians, who immortalized her in literature and legend. In our journey through the world of Isabel, our tale comes to an end. Let's take one last look at the queen who defied all adversities and ruled with brilliance. She once said, "I know I have the body of a weak and fragile woman, but I have the heart and stomach of a king." Her legacy lies not only in the empire she ruled, but in the spirit of courage, wisdom, and independence she inspired. Tonight, let the spirit of Queen Isabel guide our dreams, filling them with resilience, vision, and courage to challenge expectations. Sweet dreams, dear traveler of historical wonders. Napoleon Bonaparte, the emperor who dreamed of glory. Tonight, let's travel through the life and legacy of Napoleon Bonaparte, the military genius who went from obscurity to Emperor of France. His story is one of ambition, strategy, and destiny, the story of a man who conquered Europe and shaped the modern world. Close your eyes and delve into a world of great battles, resplendent palaces, and a ruler whose dreams of empire changed history. Napoleon Bonaparte was born on August 15, 1769, on the island of Corsica, shortly after it became French territory. His family belonged to the small Italian nobility, but was not rich. From a very young age, Napoleon was determined to overcome his humble origins. Sent to France to study at the Royal Military School, he excelled in mathematics, history, and military strategy. At the age of 16, he became a second lieutenant of artillery. Driven by ambition and a burning desire for glory, he was tremendously intelligent, disciplined, and possessed an unwavering will to triumph. When the French Revolution broke out, Napoleon's loyalty to the revolutionary ideals of freedom, equality, and fraternity shaped his political vision, but he saw in the chaos an opportunity to achieve greatness. Napoleon's military career skyrocketed when he defended the revolutionary government during the Siege of Toulon in 1793. His brilliant artillery tactics earned him the rank of brigadier general at only 24 years old. He continued to rise through the ranks and led a bold expedition to Italy in 1796. With unparalleled strategic genius, he defeated the Austrian forces, securing French control over northern Italy. His soldiers adored him and called him Le Petit Caporal, the little corporal, for his courage and leadership. Returning to France as a hero, Napoleon launched the Egypt campaign in 1798 with the aim of disrupting British trade routes. Although his fleet was destroyed by Admiral Nelson at the Battle of the Nile, he made important scientific discoveries, including the Rosetta Stone, which unlocked the secrets of Egyptian hieroglyphs. France was mired in chaos, plagued by political corruption and economic crisis. Sensing an opportunity, Napoleon staged a coup d'état on 18th Brumaire, November 9, 1799, overthrowing the Directory and establishing the consulate with himself as first consul. He declared, "I found the crown of France lying on the ground and picked it up with my sword." With his charismatic leadership and political acumen, he restored order, stability, and prosperity to France. In 1804, he was crowned Emperor of the French in a grand ceremony in the Notre Dame Cathedral, symbolizing his supremacy and independence from the Church. The era of Napoleon had begun. Napoleon embarked on a series of military campaigns, known as the Napoleonic Wars, expanding his empire throughout Europe. He defeated Austria and Russia at the Battle of Austerlitz in 1805, his most brilliant victory, which earned him the title of Master of Europe. He crushed Prussia at the Battle of Jena and occupied Berlin in 1807. He signed the Treaty of Tilsit with Alexander I of Russia, dividing Europe between them. His empire extended from Spain to Poland, dominating the European continent. He introduced the Napoleonic Code, a legal system that abolished feudal privileges and promoted civil rights, influencing legal systems around the world. However, his ambition led him to the unfortunate Peninsular War in Spain and the disastrous Russian campaign of 1812. The harsh Russian winter and scorched earth tactics devastated his Grande Armée, marking the start of his decline. After his retreat from Russia, Napoleon faced a coalition of European powers united against him at the Battle of Leipzig in 1813. He was defeated and forced to abdicate in 1814. Exiled to the island of Elba, he plotted his return in 1815. He escaped from Elba and marched back to Paris during the 100 days to reclaim his throne, but his return was ephemeral. In the Battle of Waterloo, he faced the combined forces of Great Britain and Prussia and was defeated by the Duke of Wellington. His empire collapsed, and he was exiled to St. Helena, a remote island in the South Atlantic, where he spent his last years reflecting on his legacy. On May 5, 1821, Napoleon died, reportedly whispering his last words. The head of the French army, Josephine. The impact of Napoleon on history is unparalleled. He modernized the administration, economy, and education of France. His Napoleonic Code became the basis for the legal systems of Europe and Latin America. His military tactics are studied by generals to this day and inspire leaders from Wellington to Eisenhower. His vision of a united Europe influenced the creation of a European Union, but his ambition led him to devastating wars that left millions dead. He was a hero and conqueror, a visionary and a tyrant, a man whose complex legacy defies any simplistic judgment. As we reach the end of our journey through the world of Napoleon, let's take one last look at the man who died dreaming of an empire. He himself said that impossible is a word only found in the dictionary of fools. His legacy does not reside solely in the lands he conquered, but in the spirit of ambition and determination that it inspired. Tonight, let the spirit of Napoleon Bonaparte guide your dreams, filling them with courage, ambition, and the impulse to forge your destiny. Sweet dreams, dear traveler of historical wonders. Cyrus the Great, the King of Kings. Let's travel through the life and legacy of Cyrus the Great, the visionary ruler who founded the Persian Empire and became one of history's most revered leaders. His story is one of conquest, justice, and wisdom, the story of a king who built an empire not only through strength, but also through tolerance and diplomacy. Close your eyes and enter a world of golden palaces and deserts, and a ruler whose name became synonymous with greatness. Cyrus II, later known as Cyrus the Great, was born around the year 600 BC. In the heart of Persia in what is today Iran. He was a member of the Achaemenid dynasty, son of King Cambyses and grandson of a powerful Median ruler. Legend has it that, before his birth, his grandfather, King Astyages of Media, had a terrible dream in which his grandson overthrew him. To avoid it, he ordered that little Cyrus be murdered, but a kind shepherd secretly raised the child, who grew up strong, intelligent, and brave. As a young man, he demonstrated his leadership skills and, when the time came, rebelled against his grandfather and united the Persian and Median peoples under his rule. It was the beginning of an empire that would change history. Cyrus was not only a warrior, but also a brilliant strategist and diplomat. After uniting Persia and Media, he set his sights on expanding his domain. His army was disciplined and innovative and employed war and psychological tactics that gave him an advantage over his enemies. His first great conquest was the Kingdom of Lydia in 546 BC, governed by the rich king Croesus, famous for his immense riches. Despite Croesus's powerful army, Cyrus outwitted him and captured his capital, Sardis. Instead of executing him, Cyrus spared his life, showing his characteristic mercy and wisdom. Then he headed east, subduing vast territories of Central Asia and guaranteeing the security and stability of his growing empire. But his greatest conquest was yet to come. In 539 BC, Cyrus set his sights on the powerful Babylonian Empire, ruled by King Nabonidus. The city of Babylon, one of the largest in the ancient world, was believed to be impenetrable, surrounded by enormous walls and the great Euphrates River. However, Cyrus was a master of strategy. He diverted the course of the Euphrates, lowering its level so that his army could enter through the riverbed. The city fell without a major battle, and instead of destroying it, Cyrus proclaimed himself not a conqueror, but a liberator. His government was different from all the previous ones. He freed the enslaved Jewish people, allowing them to return to Jerusalem and rebuild their temple, an act that was recorded in the Bible and the Cyrus Cylinder, one of history's first declarations of human rights. His respect for different cultures and religions distinguished him as a wise and compassionate ruler. The most enduring legacy of Cyrus is the Cyrus Cylinder, an ancient clay tablet on which his proclamations are inscribed. It details his policies of religious tolerance, freedom for enslaved peoples, and good governance. Unlike other conquerors who imposed their beliefs on their subjects, Cyrus respected local customs and religions. He allowed conquered peoples to preserve their traditions, which guaranteed loyalty and stability in his empire. This legacy of tolerance and justice earned him the admiration of future generations. Today, the United Nations recognizes the Cyrus Cylinder as one of the first symbols of human rights and good government. Cyrus continued to expand his empire until his last campaign against the Medes, a fierce nomadic tribe from Central Asia. According to legend, their queen Tamiris challenged him in battle, seeking revenge for her son's death at the hands of the Persians. A brutal battle was fought, and Cyrus fell in combat around the year 530 AC. Some versions say that he was killed on the battlefield, while others suggest that he died from wounds suffered during battle. Regardless of how his end was, his name was forever etched in history as one of history's greatest rulers. His body was buried in a simple but elegant tomb in Pagade, his capital. The tomb remains a sacred place, a testament to his enduring legacy. The empire of Cyrus, known as the Achaemenid Empire, became the largest ever, extending from the Indus River to the Sea of Azov. His successors, including Darius the Great and Xerxes I, continued his vision, marking the course of history. His model of government, based on tolerance, respect, and fair administration, inspired countless leaders, from Alexander the Great to the founding fathers of the United States. His ideas on religious freedom and human rights remain relevant today, even centuries later. The Persian people venerate him as the father of Persia. His reign marked the beginning of one of the most influential empires in history, which shaped the art, science, politics, and philosophy of generations to come. As we reach the end of our journey through the world of Cyrus, let's take one last look at the king who ruled with justice, strength, and wisdom. He once said, "I am Cyrus, king of the world." His legacy lies not only in the lands he conquered, but in the ideals of justice, unity, and tolerance that still inspire the world today. Tonight, let the spirit of Cyrus the Great guide your dreams, filling them with courage, wisdom, and the vision to lead with justice. Sweet dreams, dear traveler of historical wonders. Augustus, the first emperor of Rome. Let's travel through the life and legacy of Augustus, the man who transformed Rome from a republic in ruins into a powerful empire. His story is one of political brilliance, military strategy, and a vision that shaped the Western world. Close your eyes and delve into a world of grandiose marble temples, fierce battles, and the dawn of the Roman Empire. Augustus was born as Cyrano Octavio in the year 63 AC, within a rich but relatively unknown Roman family. His luck changed drastically when his great-uncle Julius Caesar adopted him as a son and named him heir to his immense political and military power. When Caesar was assassinated in the year 44 C, the Roman Republic plunged into chaos. At only 18 years old, Octavian stepped forward to claim his inheritance, although at first few took him seriously. His astute patience and determination soon made him a formidable force in Roman politics. To consolidate his power, Octavian formed the Second Triumvirate with Marco Antonio and Lepidus, a political alliance that would dominate Rome for years. Together, they pursued Caesar's assassins, Brutus and Cassius, culminating in their defeat at the Battle of Philippi in the year 42 AC. But the alliance was not destined to last. Over time, tensions between Octavian and Mark Antony increased, especially when Antony became involved with Cleopatra, Queen of Egypt. Octavian seized the opportunity to turn Rome against Antony, presenting him as a traitor under the spell of Cleopatra. In the year 31 AC, Octavian defeated Antonio and Marco Cassiodoriano and Marco Antonio, especially when Antonio became involved with Cleopatra, the Queen of Egypto. Octavian seized the opportunity to turn Roma against Antonio, portraying him as a traitor under the spell of Cleopatra. In the year 31 AC, his rivalry led to the Battle of Actium, where Octavian's fleet, commanded by Agrippa, crushed Antony and Cleopatra. The lovers fled to Egypt, where they took their own lives. With his last great rival out of the way, Octavio became the undisputed master of Rome in the year 27 BC. Octavio took the name of Augusto, which means the venerated, instead of declaring himself a dictator. Skillfully, he maintained the illusion of the Republic while wielding supreme power. The Senate granted him an almost unlimited authority, turning him into that declare himself dictator. Skillfully, he maintained the illusion of the Republic while wielding supreme power. The Senate granted him almost unlimited authority, turning him into the first emperor of Rome. Under his rule, Rome entered an era of unprecedented stability and prosperity known as the Pax Romana, a period of peace that lasted more than 200 years. Augusto reformed the army, established a professional bureaucracy, improved the infrastructure, and promoted the arts and literature. As he himself boasted, "I found Rome a city of bricks, and I left it as a city of marble." Among his architectural projects are the Pantheon, the Era Augusti, and the Forum of Augusto, symbols of his enduring legacy. Augusto governed for more than 40 years, guiding Rome through its transformation into an empire. He carefully managed his image as princeps, first citizen, avoiding the destiny of his uncle Julio Caesar, who was assassinated for seeking too much power. Augusto passed away at the age of 75 years. His body was buried in the mausoleum of Augusto and was deified by the Senate as Divus Augusto, venerated forever as a god. His influence lasted long after his death. All the emperors that followed him carried the title of Caesar or Augusto, and his reforms shaped Rome for centuries. Even today, his name lives on in our calendar. The month of August receives its name in his honor. As we arrive at its end, our trip through the world of Augusto comes to its end. Take a last look at the man who turned Rome into an empire. He once said, "Festina lente," hurry but calmly. His careful and calculated ascent to power assured the longevity of Rome, demonstrating that true leadership is built on patience, vision, and unwavering determination. Tonight, let the spirit of Augusto guide your dreams, filling them with wisdom, ambition, and the courage to shape your own destiny. Sweet dreams, dear traveler of the historical wonders. Louis XIV, the Sun King, who governed with splendor. Let's travel through the life and legacy of Louis XIV, the monarch who reigned longer than any other European king and transformed France into a great, powerful nation. His history is one of absolute power, a lavish spectacle, and a vision that marked the destiny of France. Close your eyes and delve into a world of golden palaces, extravagant courts, and a ruler who called himself the Sun King. Louis XIV was born on September 5, 1638, son of King Louis XIII and Anne of Austria. His birth was considered a miracle, since his parents had struggled for years to have a son. For this reason, he was called Dieudonné, which means given by God. At 5, after the death of his father, the young Louis became King of France. However, the true power was in the hands of his mother and his prime minister, Cardinal Mazarin, who governed as regent during his youth. France was involved in civil wars known as the Fronde, in which rebellious nobles challenged the royal authority. These early experiences taught Louis a crucial lesson: never allow anyone to threaten the power of the monarchy. When Cardinal Mazarin died in 1661, Louis XIV, at the age of 22, took total control of the government and surprised the court when declaring, "L'état, c'est moi. I am the state." From that moment, he governed with absolute authority, centralizing power and weakening the influence of the nobility. To ensure his control, he restructured the French administration, created a strong army, and promoted economic reforms through his minister Jean-Baptiste Colbert. He imposed religious unity by revoking the Edict of Nantes, which forced the Protestants to convert or flee from France. Louis believed that his authority came from divine right, positioning himself as the Sun King around which all France revolved. His court became the most magnificent in Europe, and his vision of greatness shaped the very image of monarchy. To show his absolute power, Louis transformed a modest hunting pavilion into the Great Palace of Versailles, a symbol of the prestige of France. It became the center of political and social life, with its magnificent hall of mirrors, its extensive gardens, and its luxurious decoration, designed to impress and control the nobility. The court of Versailles was a spectacle of elaborate ceremonies, extravagant fashion, and an intricate protocol. The nobles competed to gain the favor of the king, assuring this way their loyalty and dependence of his good. Versailles was not only a palace, it was a declaration, the embodiment of the vision of Louis XIV, a vision of absolute monarchy and the supremacy of France in Europe. Louis XIV sought to expand the borders of France and affirm his dominion in Europe. His reign was marked by a series of wars, among them the War of Devolution, the Franco-Dutch War, and the War of the Spanish Succession. Although France gained territories and demonstrated its military power, the constant wars depleted the economy and posed a burden for the people. The Treaty of Utrecht in 1713 curbed the ambitions of Louis XIV. Ambitions, guaranteeing that France did not unite with Spain under a single crown. Despite his military setbacks, Louis consolidated France as the most powerful state in Europe, influencing diplomacy, culture, and war for generations. After governing for 72 years, Louis XIV died on September 1st, 1715, leaving an imperishable legacy. His reign marked the beginning of an era, a period of immense cultural and artistic achievements. He sponsored artists, musicians, and playwrights such as Molière, Racine, and Lully, elevating French culture to new heights. His influence extended beyond politics. His model of absolute monarchy inspired rulers throughout Europe, from Peter the Great of Russia to Frederick the Great of Prussia. However, his excessive spending, costly wars, and authoritarian government sowed the seeds of future unrest. Less than a century later, France would see the rise of the Revolution, which challenged the monarchy that he had glorified. As our journey through the world of Louis XIV comes to an end, take one last look at the king who reigned with unparalleled splendor. He once said, "Has God forgotten all that I have done for him?" His name became synonymous with absolute power, and his palace, a testament to his greatness and his vision, left an indelible mark on history. Tonight, let the spirit of Louis XIV guide your dreams, filling them with ambition, elegance, and a pursuit of greatness. Sweet dreams, dear traveler of historical wonders. Henry VII, the king who changed England forever. Let's travel through the life and legacy of Henry VII, the formidable monarch whose reign reshaped the history of England. His story is one of power, ambition, and transformation, the story of a king who defied the Pope, founded a new church, and left a legacy of greatness and controversy. Close your eyes and step into a world of royal courts, political intrigues, and a ruler whose 6 marriages became legendary. Henry VII was born on June 28, 1491, the second son of Henry II and Isabel de York. As a child, he was never expected to be king, since his older brother, Arthur, was the heir to the throne, but when Arthur died unexpectedly in 1502, the destiny of young Henry changed forever. Henry was raised in an environment rich in learning, music, and physical training. He excelled in languages, theology, and philosophy, mastered several languages, and absorbed the ideals of Renaissance humanism. He was also a skilled athlete who excelled in jousting, hunting, and tennis. Presenting himself as the archetype of a strong and capable ruler, at only 17 years old, Enrique was crowned King of England in 1509 and married his brother's widow of Enrique IV, Catalina de Aragon, to secure an alliance with Spain. Handsome, athletic, and intelligent, Henry was the ideal Renaissance king. His reign began with promises, but his thirst for power and his desire to have a male heir would soon define his government for years. The marriage to Catherine of Aragon only produced one daughter, Mary, but no male son to inherit the throne. Frustrated and convinced that God was punishing him for marrying his brother's widow, Henry requested an annulment from the Pope. When Pope Clement VII refused to grant it due to political pressures from the powerful Emperor Charles I of the Holy Roman Germanic Empire, Henry became increasingly frustrated, and the Pope's refusal triggered one of the most important religious upheavals in history. Determined to take matters into his own hands, Henry, with the help of his chief advisor, Thomas Cromwell, proclaimed himself supreme head of the Church of England in 1534, breaking with the authority of the Catholic Church. This event, known as the English Reformation, not only allowed him to remarry, but also led to the dissolution of the monasteries, the redistribution of their wealth, and a fundamental change in English government and religion. Henry's decision caused shock throughout Europe and created deep divisions between Catholic and Protestant nations. The break with Rome reshaped the spiritual and political landscape of England, placing the monarchy at the center of religious authority. The marriages of Henry VII marked both his personal life and the future of England. His 6 wives had different destinies, and each played a role in his search for an heir. Catherine of Aragon divorced, Her marriage lasted more than 20 years before Henry's obsession with having a male son led to its annulment. Catherine remained faithful to her faith and her daughter Mary, but was exiled from court and died in obscurity. And Boleyn was executed. The ambitious and intelligent Anne Boleyn captivated Henry, but when she also failed to give him a male son, she was accused of adultery, treason, and incest. In 1536, she was executed in the Tower of London, leaving behind her daughter Elizabeth. Jane Seymour died after giving birth. The third wife, Jane Seymour, gave him the long-awaited son, Edward V, but died a few days after giving birth, in 1537. Henry considered her his true wife and was later buried next to her. Anne of Cleves divorced from a political marriage arranged by Cromwell. Henry did not find her attractive and annulled the marriage after 6 months. She was granted a generous pension and lived comfortably in England. Catherine Howard was executed young and flirtatious. Catherine Howard was accused of adultery and beheaded in 1542, repeating the tragic fate of Anne Boleyn. Catherine Parr survived and Henry's last wife. Catherine Parr was a wise and capable woman who helped reconcile Henry with his daughters Mary and Elizabeth. She survived him and later remarried. As Henry aged, his once athletic figure became bloated, his temperament more unpredictable, and his paranoia increased. A leg injury caused by an accident in a joust left him with constant pain, and he suffered from obesity and ulcers, which made his last years increasingly difficult despite his declining health. Despite his declining health, he continued to rule with absolute authority, crushing rebellions and imposing religious reforms. His extravagant spending, fueled by the wealth of the dissolved monasteries, led to economic instability. Enrique died on January 28, 1547, at 55 years old. He was succeeded by his son Eduardo V, but his reign was brief. After Eduardo's death, Maria ruled briefly before Isabel ascended to the throne, initiating the Golden Age of England. The reign of Enrique VI changed England forever. His rupture with the Catholic Church, the dissolution of the monasteries, and the establishment of the Church of England had lasting religious and political effects. The creation of a powerful navy laid the groundwork for England's maritime dominion in the centuries to come. His reign left behind a mixture of admiration and controversy. On one hand, he was a patron of the arts, a scholar, and a powerful leader. But on the other, he was considered a tyrant prone to cruelty and excess. Although he failed to secure a stable line of succession, his daughter Isabel became one of the great monarchs of England, demonstrating that Enrique's legacy extended far beyond his own reign. As we reach the end of our journey through the world of Enrique VII, let's take a final look at the king who redefined the monarchy. He once said, "I see that my end is near, but I am satisfied because I have fulfilled my duty." His reign was one of triumphs and turmoil, and it left an indelible mark on history. Tonight, let us allow the spirit of Enrique VII to guide our dreams, filling them with ambition, resilience, and the echoes of a world that was changed forever. Sweet dreams, dear traveler of historical wonders. Pedro the Great, the Tsar who transformed Russia. Let's travel through the life and legacy of Pedro the Great, the visionary ruler who pulled Russia into the modern world. His story is one of ambition, reforms, and relentless determination. The story of a man who reshaped his country, built a new and grandiose capital, and turned Russia into a formidable empire. Close your eyes and delve into a world of grandiose palaces, naval conquests, and the unstoppable will of a man who refused to accept stagnation. Pedro was born in 1672, son of Tsar Alexa III and his second wife, Natalia Nishina. He was a curious and energetic child, but his early years were marked by political turmoil. When his father died, Pedro's half-brother, Fodor III, ascended to the throne, but his weak health provoked a power struggle between two rival factions. The family of Pedro, the Nishin family, and his half-sister Sofia, supported by the Miloslavsky faction. After the death of Fodor, Sofia took power as regent, ruling on behalf of the young Pedro and his half-brother Ian, who was physically and mentally fragile. However, Pedro's mother and her supporters waited for the opportune moment, and, in 1689, Pedro overthrew Sofia and assumed full control at just 17 years old, becoming the undisputed ruler of Russia. Unlike previous Russian rulers, Pedro felt a deep fascination for European advances and, determined to modernize his country, he embarked on a great embassy, a 2-year trip through Western Europe, visiting the Netherlands, England, and Austria, where he studied naval construction, military tactics, and European customs, bringing with him knowledge that would change Russia forever. Upon his return, Pedro enacted radical reforms. He modernized the army by introducing European tactics and weapons, built Russia's first navy, recognizing the importance of naval power, forced nobles to adopt Western dress, and even personally cut off their long beards to enforce his new policies. He reorganized the Russian government, reducing the power of the traditional nobility and creating a system based on merit. He reformed the Orthodox Church, placing it under state control. Pedro's reforms were radical and were often met with resistance, but his iron will ensure that they were carried out. He was willing to ruthlessly crush the opposition to push Russia forward. One of Pedro's greatest ambitions was to give Russia access to the Baltic Sea, which would allow trade and expansion. This led to the Great Northern War between 1700 and 1721 against Sweden, then a dominant European power. Despite early defeats, Pedro reorganized his forces and, in 1709, at the Battle of Pava, Russia decisively crushed the Swedish army, marking a turning point in the war. After years of conflict, the Treaty of Nystad of 1721 granted Russia vast territories along the Baltic, securing its status as one of the main European powers. To commemorate this achievement, Pedro took the title of Emperor of all Russia, transforming his kingdom from a medieval tsardom into a true empire. Determined to create a European-style capital, Pedro founded St. Petersburg in 1703 in the marshes of the Neva River. Built with forced labor, the city was a testament to Pedro's vision and resilience. He designed it to rival the great cities of Europe, with grand boulevards, canals, and opulent palaces. St. Petersburg became known as Russia's window to the West, a symbol of the country's new identity. Pedro made it the capital of Russia in 1712, moving power away from the old conservative bastion of Moscow. Pedro I's relentless modernizing drive was often accompanied by cruelty. He suppressed revolts with brutality, crushed the independence of the boyars, and demanded absolute loyalty, not even forgiving his own family. His son Alexei, who opposed his reforms, was arrested, tortured, and died in captivity, possibly on Pedro's orders. Despite his harsh methods, Pedro I's vision for Russia was unwavering. He worked tirelessly, personally inspecting projects, learning trades, and driving his country towards greatness. Pedro Daí de 1725, prop su visión de Rusia fue inquebrantable. He worked tirelessly, personally inspecting projects, learning trades, and driving his country towards greatness. Pedro died in 1725, probably from a bladder infection after rescuing some sailors from an icy river. His death marked the end of an era, but his legacy endured. He expanded Russia's borders, making it one of the largest empires in the world, revolutionized the army, and laid the foundations for its future as a world power. He transformed the government, making it more centralized and efficient. He introduced Western ideals, bringing Russia into the modern era. His beloved city, St. Petersburg, remains a testament to his vision. Although Pedro ruled with an iron fist, his impact on Russia was undeniable. He turned a backward medieval kingdom into a European power, laying the foundations for centuries of Russian dominance. As our journey through the world of Pedro comes to an end, let's take a last look at the Tsar who refused to accept the status quo. He once said, "I have conquered an empire, but I have not been able to conquer myself." His determination, brilliance, and willpower reshaped Russia forever. Tonight, let the spirit of Pedro el Grande guide your dreams, filling them with ambition, resilience, and the courage to embrace change. Sweet dreams, dear traveler of historical wonders. King Solomon, the wisest king of all. Let's travel through the life and legend of King Solomon, the ruler whose wisdom, wealth, and power became matter of legend. His story is one of divine gifts, great constructions, and timeless proverbs, the story of a king who sought understanding above all else. Close your eyes and delve into a world of golden palaces, sacred temples, and the wisdom that shaped a kingdom. Solomon was born around the year 990 A.C., son of King David and Bathsheba. His birth followed a dramatic and controversial chapter in the history of Israel, since Bathsheba had been the wife of Uriah before David's intervention. Despite this, Solomon was chosen as David's heir, bypassing his elder brothers. When King David's health declined, a power struggle broke out. His son Adonijah tried to seize the throne, but with the support of the prophet Nathan and Solomon's mother, David declared Solomon his legitimate successor in a great ceremony. Solomon was anointed king, securing his place as ruler of Israel. Shortly after ascending the throne, Solomon had a dream in which God appeared to him and offered to grant him anything he desired. Instead of asking for wealth or power, Solomon humbly asked for wisdom to govern his with justice. Pleased by his altruism, God granted him unparalleled wisdom, in addition to incomparable riches and honors. His intelligence became legendary and attracted rulers and scholars from distant lands who came in search of his advice. One of his most famous judgments involved two women who claimed to be the mother of the same baby. In a test of true maternal love, Solomon suggested cutting the child in two, knowing that the true mother would prefer to give up her son rather than see him suffer. The wisdom of his verdict consolidated his reputation as a fair and insightful ruler. One of Solomon's greatest achievements was the construction of the first temple in Jerusalem, thus fulfilling his father David's dream of building a permanent home for the Ark of the Covenant. This magnificent temple was adorned with gold, cedar wood, and sacred carvings designed to honor God and unite the people of Israel. The project took 7 years to complete, with materials coming from all over the known world, including the famous cedars of Lebanon and large amounts of gold and precious stones. The temple became the spiritual heart of Israel, a place of pilgrimage and divine worship for generations. Under the reign of Solomon, Israel reached new heights of prosperity, becoming a center of commerce and diplomacy. His enormous wealth allowed for great architectural projects, and his influence spread throughout the ancient world. One of the most famous episodes of his reign was the visit of the Queen of Sheba, a mysterious ruler from a distant land, possibly Ethiopia or Arabia, intrigued by the accounts of his wisdom. She brought rich gifts of spices, gold, and jewels to test his intelligence. After witnessing his wisdom firsthand and marveling at the splendor of his court, she declared that Solomon's greatness surpassed even the rumors she had heard. Their meeting became a symbol of knowledge, diplomacy, and the exchange of cultures. Despite his legendary wisdom, Solomon's last years were marked by excess and spiritual decline. He took hundreds of wives and concubines, many of whom were from foreign nations and worshipped different gods. Under their influence, he allowed the construction of temples to pagan deities, turning away from his devotion to God. As a consequence, God predicted that Solomon's kingdom would be divided after his death. Although Israel continued to prosper during his life, internal struggles and resentment grew among his people. Solomon reigned for 40 years, but upon his death, his empire fractured. His son Rehoboam inherited the throne, but his harsh rule led to a rebellion that divided the kingdom into Israel in the north and Judah in the south. Although his kingdom eventually fractured, Solomon's legacy endured. He is credited with authoring much of the Book of Proverbs, Ecclesiastes, and the poetic Song of Songs, works that continue to inspire and guide people to this day. His temple, although later destroyed, remained a symbol of faith and devotion. The wisdom attributed to him became a model of just leadership, and his name remains synonymous with insight, judgment, and understanding. Even today, The story of Solomon reminds us that wisdom is the greatest treasure of all, but even the wisest among us must guard against the temptations of power and wealth. As we reach the end of our journey through Solomon's world, let's take one last look at the king who sought wisdom above all else. He once said that the fear of the Lord is the beginning of wisdom. His reign was one of splendor and enlightenment, but also a warning about excesses and human fallibility. Tonight, let the spirit of King Solomon guide our dreams, filling them with understanding and the search for a righteous heart. Sweet dreams, dear traveler of historical wonders. Cleopatra, the last queen of Egypt. Let's travel through the life and legend of Cleopatra, the last pharaoh of Egypt and a most fascinating figure of history. Her story is one of intelligence, power, and romance. The story of a queen who captivated two of Rome's greatest leaders and fought to preserve her kingdom. Close your eyes and delve into a world of golden palaces, political secrets, and a woman who defied all adversities to leave her mark on history. Cleopatra was born in the year 69 AC, in the bosom of the Ptolemaic dynasty, a Greek family that had governed Egypt since the time of Alexander the Great. Unlike most of her ancestors, she embraced Egyptian culture and even learned to speak the native language, which was uncommon among the Greek rulers of Egypt. Her father, Timoteo I-12, was an unpopular ruler, and, upon his death, Cleopatra ascended to the throne at only 18 years, governing together with her younger brother, Timoteo I-13, as co-ruler. However, palace intrigues and power struggles soon broke out, which forced Cleopatra into exile, but she was not a woman who would be easily defeated. In the year 48 AC, Cleopatra saw an opportunity to regain her throne when Julio Caesar, the most powerful general, arrived in Egypt as his kingdom plunged into chaos. She needed his support and, according to legend, she sneaked into Caesar's rooms rolled up in a carpet, making an unforgettable and dramatic entrance. Her intelligence, charm, and political insight conquered Caesar, and, with his military support, she defeated the forces of her brother, and Ptolemy 13 drowned in the Nile while trying to flee. Cleopatra was restored as Queen of Egypt and went on to rule together with her younger brother, Ptolemy 14. Cleopatra and Caesar became lovers, and, in the year 47 AC, she gave birth to her son, Caesarion, the little Caesar. She traveled to Rome with him to consolidate her alliance with Caesar, but when he was assassinated in the year 44 AC, Cleopatra returned to Egypt knowing that her protector had died and that the future was uncertain. After the death of Caesar, Rome plunged into a civil war. Two men emerged as dominant figures: Octavio, Caesar's adopted son, and Marco Antonio, one of Caesar's most trusted generals. Cleopatra allied herself with Antonio and met him in the year 41 AC. In legendary circumstances, she sailed to meet him in a magnificent barge dressed as the goddess Aphrodite, wrapped in golden perfume, which captivated Antonio from the moment they met. Their relationship was not only romantic, but also political, since it was evident that Cleopatra needed Antonio's support to maintain the independence of Egypt, and he needed her wealth to finance his campaigns. Together, they ruled as a powerful couple of the ancient world, had 3 children, and formed an alliance that threatened Rome itself. Cleopatra imagined an empire in which Egypt and Rome could rule together, restoring the power of the East in Rome. Octavio saw Cleopatra and Antonio as a threat, so he launched a propaganda campaign in which he presented Cleopatra as an intriguing seductress who had bewitched Antonio and sought to undermine Rome. The rivalry intensified into an all-out war in the year 31 AC. Octavio's forces faced the navy of Antonio and Cleopatra in the Battle of Actium. Their fleet was defeated, and their fate was sealed. Antonio and Cleopatra fled to Egypt, where they resisted until the end, aware that defeat was inevitable. Antonio threw himself on his sword, believing that Cleopatra had already died. When she found him dying, she embraced him as he breathed his last breath. Octavio marched on Egypt, determined to capture Cleopatra and exhibit her through Rome as a trophy. Instead of suffering such humiliation, Cleopatra decided to end her life. According to legend, she had an Egyptian viper smuggled into her room to bite her. Whether this story is true or not, she died on August 12th of the year 30 A.C. at the age of 39 years. With her death, Egypt fell under Roman rule, marking the end of the Ptolemaic dynasty and the last independent reign of ancient Egypt. Cleopatra's legacy is one of power, intelligence, and resistance. She was not simply a seductress or a pawn in the games of Rome, but a shrewd politician, a brilliant linguist, and a woman who earned respect in a world dominated by men. Her story has been immortalized in art, literature, and film, from Shakespeare's Antonio and Cleopatra to Hollywood epics. Her name remains a symbol of femininity, strength, and political cunning. Although her empire fell, her legend endures, whispering through the sands of Egypt, in the ruins of Alexandria, and in the hearts of those who dream of power, love, and destiny. As our journey through the world of Cleopatra comes to an end, take one last look at the queen who defied the empires. She once said, "I will not be defeated." Her reign was one of seduction and strategy, of love and war, but, above all, of unwavering will. Tonight, let the spirit of Cleopatra guide your dreams, filling them with ambition, courage, and the fire of a queen who refused to be forgotten. Sweet dreams, dear traveler of historical wonders. Marco Aurelius, the philosopher emperor. Let's travel through the life and legacy of Marco Aurelius, the Roman emperor whose wisdom and stoicism shaped the eras. His story is a story of leadership, philosophy, and inner strength. It is the story of a ruler who governed with reason, justice, and a relentless pursuit of virtue. Close your eyes and delve into a world of marble palaces, fierce battles, and the mind of a man who sought peace in a turbulent world. Marco Aurelius was born in the year 121 in Rome, into a rich and influential family. From a very young age, he showed a deep interest in learning and philosophy. He was adopted by his uncle, Emperor Antoninus Pius, who educated him to be his successor. Raised in the imperial court, Marco was educated by the best tutors in literature, rhetoric, law, and, most importantly, Stoic philosophy. Under the guidance of Junius Rusticus, he became deeply committed to the Stoic ideals of reason, duty, and self-control, which would later define his reign. Unlike other princes raised in luxury, Marco was humble, introspective, and disciplined. He wore simple clothes, slept in a simple bed, and embraced the Stoic practice of finding satisfaction through virtue and wisdom. His deep reflections and philosophical nature were evident even in his youth, which earned him the nickname Verissimus, the most truthful. In 161, after the death of Antoninus Pius, Marco Aurelius ascended to the throne, sharing power with his adoptive brother Lucius Verus. It was the first time in the history of Rome that two emperors ruled jointly, symbolizing unity and stability despite their opposing personalities. Marco was serious and philosophical, while Lucius was more hedonistic and carefree. They maintained a harmonious government. Marco took care of the administration and legal matters, while Lucius led the military campaigns in the east. His reign was soon tested by a series of calamities. The war with the Parthians broke out in the east, threatening the eastern provinces of Rome. A devastating plague brought by returning soldiers ravaged the empire, killing thousands. The Germanic tribes began to launch invasions along the northern borders, challenging the defenses of Rome. Through these crises, Marco demonstrated remarkable resilience and leadership, maintaining stability and unity in the empire. Unlike other emperors who sought glory and conquest, Marco ruled with justice, reason, and humility. He believed in leading by example, showing compassion even towards his enemies, and ruling with equity. His meditations are a testament to his Stoic beliefs, which emphasize the acceptance of fate and the order of nature, the importance of self-discipline and inner peace, the pursuit of virtue and wisdom above material wealth, and the recognition of the impermanence of life and fame. He wrote these reflections during military campaigns, often intense on the battlefield, reminding himself to remain firm, calm, and rational, regardless of the external chaos. His writings were deeply personal and never intended for publication, which makes them a rare vision into the mind of a philosopher king. For much of his reign, Marco was consumed by the Marcomannic Wars, a series of brutal conflicts along the northern borders of the empire. The Germanic tribes, sensing Roman weakness due to the plague, launched invasions that threatened Italy. Despite his philosophical nature, Marco Aurelius proved to be a capable military leader. He reorganized the army, personally led his troops, and achieved several hard-fought victories. The wars were long and exhausting, and tested his determination and endurance. In the midst of the battles, he continued with his philosophical reflections and found comfort in the Stoic teachings, reminding himself that suffering was part of the natural order of life and that true strength resided in the mastery of emotions. The conflicts also inspired his vision of a united empire. He began to integrate the defeated tribes into Roman society, offering them lands in exchange for loyalty, thus maintaining peace through diplomacy and inclusion. In 180, while still campaigning along the Danube, Marco Aurelius fell ill. On his deathbed, he called his son Commodus and advised him to rule with virtue and wisdom, but Marco feared that his son lacked the character necessary to lead wisely. On March 17, 180 A.D.C., Marco Aurelius passed away, and his death marked the end of the Pax Romana, a long period of peace and prosperity for the Roman Empire. His soldiers mourned him deeply, as he was not only their emperor, but a just and wise leader. His son Commodus inherited the throne, but his corrupt government led to political unrest, which marked the beginning of the decline of the Roman Empire. However, the legacy of Marco Aurelius endured through his writings and his example as the ideal philosopher king. The Meditations of Marco Aurelius remain a cornerstone of Stoic philosophy, influencing leaders, scholars, and thinkers throughout history. His teachings on virtue, reason, and acceptance continue to inspire those who seek strength and wisdom in the face of adversity. He is remembered as the last of the 5 good emperors, a ruler who balanced power with humility, war with wisdom, and authority with introspection. His life exemplifies the Stoic ideal of a just, rational, and virtuous existence. Even today, his words resonate with timeless truths that guide readers on the path to inner peace and self-mastery. As we reach the end of our journey through the world of Marco Aurelius, let's take one last look at the emperor who ruled with wisdom and humility. He once wrote, "The happiness of your life depends on the quality of your thoughts." His reign was one of courage and contemplation, of power tempered by philosophy. Tonight, let the spirit of Marco Aurelius guide your dreams, filling them with strength, wisdom, and the pursuit of virtue. Sweet dreams, dear traveler of historical wonders.